Okay, here we fucking go. Welcome to. Oh, I'll start. Plus Ultra presents The Grey Lodge, a new series in speculative Gnosticism. Welcome to Hapaborea. That's pretty fucking good. I'm Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints, and we have been hosting these speculative Gnostic spaces under the banner of the Grey Lodge, which is a group of magicians, mystics, misfits, you could say. And we've been doing these Friday night Gnostic Mass. So that's one series we've done. We've done Aeon of the Daughter. That's one series we've done. And now we are entering into the Hapaborean West. So welcome. Obviously, this is a speculative Gnostic series, so everything that we say is speculative. It's not. You can approach it non-dually, as I've always said in all of the spaces. That's probably the secret of of all magical approaches is non-dualism, or at least a key, at least in a very important keystone. And magic is real, and these spaces are metamagical, metahistorical, and metafictional. So you can take that any way you want. It's real and not real, both at the same time. It's perfectly great. As always, this, we are going to explore this idea of what the new American religion is, if that exists, and also like what is it, and if it does exist or it doesn't exist, how can we kind of like make? Is there a framework through which we can explore what that could be? So, I will introduce my three co-hosts. So Matt Mora, obviously, we'll shout out Matt because Matt is a pivotal, axial, very important member, and he is a co-host of these spaces. But for tonight, and Matt is on, we'll call it sojourn to the, I guess, Eastern Baltics. So up to Soviet sabotage, and I really don't know what Matt's doing, but I'm sure he's having fun. So we have Dr. William Birkin, Joshua the Branch, who is important lodge member number. Well, no, I'm not going to start ordering you because that actually just comes across as like kind of petty and unfair. Because I actually think of all of you very fondly. So, Joshua the Branch has been on my show. He's coming back. We're working on a series right now on the sort of metaphysics of video games, you could say. And we started, episode 1 was on the Umbrella Corporation. So we have that. We have Mr. Solar Exile, poet, Kabbalist, Zen bro. What doesn't he do? Well, I actually don't know because he is kind of a mystery, but in the best possible way. I actually do know what he does, but he's a man of many hats. So we'll say that. So very important also, and he has been on my show, and hopefully when he is not saving the world in crazy mischief, he will come back and continue our series on Kabbalah, because I think it's very fruitful. It was one of my personal. It was just a great conversation, and I feel like we have a rapport, and it's easy. It's easy when people get you. Like, you want to talk about crazy schizo Kabbalah. I feel like that's what these spaces kind of are, but in the best possible way. And of course, we have as our co-host tonight, we have King from the King of Cups YouTube channel, who I'm also working on Avatar: The Last Airbender series with. So, welcome, Chris. And then room shoutouts, we have Think Change Repeat Ashley from the Union of Unknowns, and I know she's also been working on Knights of the Storm with Jason Barker. I think that's his name. Ashley, I'm sorry if that's not correct, but I think that's right. So Ashley's been on my show. Ashley's coming back. Ashley and I have worked on actually a few series together, so we're gonna bring back an NDE series that kind of hasn't. We haven't updated it in like a year and a half, but we're revisiting it. Now is the right time because we're both kind of like at different, we're both at a new stage, and we're ready to like kind of look at things, I think, both differently, like not that different from each other per se, but differently from maybe how we were even looking at it like a year and a half ago. So really looking forward to that. Obviously Ashley's also doing a series on fantasy, and we're keeping the metafiction alive on Threshold Saints. That's what that's what it is. We're entering a new phase where we are going to look at real pop culture, and I'm going to do anime, or not anime, excuse me, Kabbalah, Schizo, and all of them. So watch out, pop culture podcast. So thank you, Ashley. Thaddeus Maximus, so a longtime mutual, one of my longest mutuals. I don't know, just a great mutual, and very supportive of me, and generally always has been. And so thank you, Thaddeus Maximus, for coming, and we appreciate you, see you, and we welcome you. Joseph Reed, honorary lodge member, and definitely part of our spaces, a stalwart. We appreciate you, we see you, we acknowledge you, and uh, not generally, we lift you up as, like, as I said, as an honorary lodge member. So thank you so much, Joseph Reed, for coming. And then we have, of course, lodge brother Ram. Ram is our Singaporean bro, somewhere I will be in a few weeks, as some of you know. So yeah, that'll be fun. Okay, and then we have Rage, of course, who is also Ram. So Ram, we love him because he's funny and adorable, and we will not allow him to be single forever. We will find him a foid that he can love, and that will love him too. So there we go. Rage. So Rage is a actual lodge member, and great to see you. Welcome back to Twitter. I know you've been active for a few weeks now, but we didn't see you for a long time. So great. Welcome to the spaces. I hope you have fun. This is gonna be weird, wild. Journey to the West shit, which Journey to the West will be the title for next week, because obviously we're going to explore kind of the parallels of the Mormon Trail, and the something I talked about with JJ Vance in the Operation GCD episode for Big Trouble in Little China was this idea of the spiritual homeland for ethnic Chinese people in Northern California, the Golden Mountain, Jin Shan. So if you hear that, yes, it is my name. It means golden. So that is what they used to call California. So very interesting. Gamshan in Cantonese instead. I can actually do both dialects. I'm just not as proficient. Cassandra, welcome. Thank you for coming. You did not miss anything. We were just finishing room shoutouts. Cassandra is a content creator, tarot card reader, Kabbalist, a Gnostic, and just she has jewelry. So if you're interested, check out that. And a very cool, kind person. I've loved that you come. So as I always say, so thank you and welcome, because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen outside of synthesis. It does not happen outside of synthesis. So it requires all of us to be here in perception, in consent, and awareness of what these spaces are. They're magic, because social media is magic. We traverse space and are literally recording on an app in that is called space, or called spaces. So we are transcending time to arrive in a coordinated point in space where we are all together in perception and awareness. And of course, my favorite, Hesed, loving kindness. So it's a big part of the Aeon of the Daughter spaces. Maybe not Hesed particularly, but the idea of love as the cause of knowledge and what that means. And obviously, if you're interested in that, you can go listen to those episodes. But this is a new series, so welcome to Hapaborea. So many of you have heard of me refer to this in the Aeon of the Daughter series. Many of you have heard me refer to this in the Friday Night Gnostic Mass. I've talked about it with Joshua, with Solar, with Ashley, with Jikoku Keiki. Many people. I think I will probably discuss it with J. David Osborne coming up. He's coming on my show, and so I highly suggest, if you're interested in that side of lit Twitter, to go listen to that show, Getting Lit. with him that I retweeted on both accounts because he obviously name drops Threshold Saints. So that's so fucking cool. And but also because I think that a lot more people are coming out as magicians. I don't know what you guys thought I was going to say there, but coming out as magicians. Don't cut that in a weird way, Matt, if you are listening back. But people are talking about it. People are very open about it. He even said, I'm not trying to big him up, but it is just cool to hear him say, like, yeah, I listen to Rune Soup. I practice sigil magic. I have a more esoteric idea of Christianity. I have a more esoteric idea maybe of the world, and that is also reflected in my work. I'm not saying this. I'm saying JDO said this. So that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly what I think our spaces have been about. I think that everyone who comes up as a co-host is literary in their own way, not necessarily. They're not necessarily writing novels necessarily, but they all have an affinity for words, an affinity for language, and affinity for the metaphysics of both of those things. So I think that's a really interesting way to think of it. Obviously, parafiction is, I would say, the general theme of my show. If somebody asks me, I always say, yeah, it's about parafiction. And they're like, what is that? So, we don't need to obviously define that, but we do need to define what the new American Gnosticism is and what Hapaborea is. But I will, of course, let my co host, because I've actually been going for like 20 minutes maybe by myself, I will actually let my co host introduce themselves if they so wish and plug whatever projects they want to plug. So, oh, we have Blue Hour Books as well. Bookery. So, Blue Hour Bookery, thank you so much. And thank you for your support of my work on the timeline. We see you, we hear, acknowledge you, and we welcome you. Okay, so we'll start with Joshua, Solar, and then, of course, King.
Hey guys, Sabat Shalom. It's nice to be here this evening, and got some projects cooking. Chris and I just did some content again last weekend. Mario, Chris and I did we premiered a cross symbolism episode that's pretty cool. Chris and I even did a follow up after that with some afterthoughts like on the Separo and some other things that relate to the cross. So that's one of our more recent things. We're planning some other projects as well. Just recorded with Jen, of course, on Umbrella Corporation. So we're relating the characters to like the Klipa and what makes a villain a villain. It's a little more broad than just about Umbrella. We tried to make it Kabbalistic, if you will. But yeah, it's great to be here tonight, and appreciate you all sharing time and space.
Brother Solar, please introduce yourself if you can, and plug anything you want to plug, and then we'll do King. Solar can't hear you. Unless you all can hear him. I can't hear him.
I can see that he's toggling his mic, but I don't hear him.
Okay. Okay, Solar, come reconnect. I'll reconnect. Yeah, just drop down and then I'll reconnect you as co-host, and then I'll let King go in the meantime. I apologize for that. Sorry, King, please go ahead. Very happy to have you here. Everybody subscribe to King's amazing YouTube channel, King of Cups. I just want to shout that out in case I didn't say that, but I'll obviously let him introduce himself.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. I was told to join by today by the branch, and I'm really excited about this topic, guys. I think one of my two of my favorite topics are Northern symbolism and Americana mysticism, and so I'm so excited for this topic today, and I can't wait to have this conversation with you guys. But yeah, I am King from King of Cups, or otherwise known as Channel KOK. I'm trying to do some magic letter hyper sigil mysticism, as a lot of your 3-letter TV channels do. So yeah, King of Cups or Channel KOK, I go by both. Refer to me as Chris or King, doesn't matter. And as the Brant said, yeah, we just had an amazing episode with Mario of Symbolic Studies on cross symbolism. Coming up, I am recording a episode with a guest about severance and the esoteric symbolism of severance, and I am excited to release that here soon. And as far as the topic of today of having Americana symbolism, I actually have episode on it on my channel with Mario of Symbolic Studies. It was his first appearance. The episode title was called From Film with Lovecraft, which I'll probably bring up later on. But I just wanted to shout out that episode as well because it has some Americana. We raised questions of what Americana is now in that episode. And it's a good one that's in my archives on my channel. But thanks for having me.
Thank you, King. We appreciate. I almost called you Chris, which I know is also okay, but I'll call you King for the space. And so, thank you so much for coming up. You are a co-host, regardless of Matt being here or not being here. Obviously, you're always welcome, as are any of our extended lodge family. And then speaking of that, and maybe someone who's not in the extended lodge family, but in our immediate lodge family, Solar. Please introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I hope you can hear me all right. Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, cool. Yeah, so greetings from one of America's natural holy places, the slopes of Mount Shasta, in a VW bus here. Yeah, so the Garthan vortex is kind of interfering with the transmission, so I will do my best to hang. I don't know how long I can last until I warp into the Paleocene and get my asshole cored out, but I'm doing what I can here and excited to be here. The only thing I have to plug is I have an episode, as Jin mentioned, coming out on Threshold Saints when it's ready. Yeah, looking forward to this conversation, even if I'm mostly a listener tonight. I will be back in my regular abode, able to contribute as normal next week.
I just wanted to say that Solar's episode will actually be out, and Ashley's episode, and Joshua's episode, and Chris's episode will be out sooner than they all think, because I'm actually doing a double release, because I didn't end up releasing Low IQ Moron, who I do love, who is like my personal friend, who I do actually like as like, he's like a really good dude, and he actually tolerates my Kabbalah bullshit, we'll call it. So good on him, because he is not his show is not about magic per se, but he comes on mine, and I take him and and we discuss things, and I treat him like I've treated him like I do these spaces. So he gets to see the weirder side of me, where I try and hold it together for most guests, right? Because it is, because obviously I'm tight with Heidi, I'm tight with Nick, I'm tight with JJ, and the reality is like as I always joke, I'm like an aging hipster who's a millennial, and obviously, and so they're Gen X, and I always joke like they're savages because they're Gen X, which is true because I'm in a group chat with them, so I do know this now, but I know there. It's been really great. I've never really been able to take a compliment. Ashley also knows this, and I know it's so surprising. It's so surprising, right, that I can't take a compliment because I'm like a huge Tifferatic personality with just a ginormo ego. But in reality, I really have a hard time with it. But it is cool to see like people who obviously have bigger shows than you, like they think you're cool, and then obviously JDO was like tweeting at me all last week being like, Jin, let me on your show. And I was like really, like he'd want to work with me. And then I mean, not that I don't think my show's cool, obviously I do, obviously I think all of you are great guests as well, and obviously I think it's really important to have people that I'm like tight with on, because that is what the show is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like discursive, experimental sort of discourse, and seeing what arises in synthesis in the sort of, in what arises in the spectral ray, in the pink ray. Because speech is really green. We'll say Vox City is really green, but so it's like a pink girl with green eyes, you could even say. So that's, as long as you're speaking the truth in at least a relative sense, and you're approaching things through loving kindness. And yeah, I mean, you may get to knowledge. You may get to knowledge through that. So obviously, yeah, I was a little flattered. I won't let it go to my ego though. But I have to make an announcement that is quite exciting. So, oh well, I'm not going to say exactly who it is, but I will be podcasting with maybe the epitome of OG occult podcasts. So it's pretty cool. It's exciting. It's not Gordon White. I've already done that. Right? I've already fucking done it. I've done Greg K from Occulted Personality. I have an episode with hopefully, well, I won't say because it hasn't come out yet, but yeah, some really interesting people and interesting people coming up. So hopefully you will all continue to be a part of both Threshold Saints and the Grey Lodge, because actually I've loved our peace. I feel like that's sort of what has given me the idea, the genesis of the idea, and not Genesis Peerage. I know she's been all over the timeline, or she, whatever the fuck. But it's not about that. It's the Genesis is like the beginning, right? It's the beginning of the seed. So we planted the seed in Aeon of the Daughter. I laid out a kind of an arc. That's what I'm calling it. I called it a 13-part gospel, or a 13 arc gospel, but it's actually not 13 parts, because 2 parts are actually going to be on Threshold Saints. Now, they're not totally finished yet, but now that I have a brand new microphone, which is what I was waiting for, that will be happening now. So exciting times. We're also redoing Tantra, because obviously I thought a lot about solar, and I need that guidance sometimes. Like, I'm like maybe a crazy wisdom in my own way, and I like my own ideas the best, obviously. But every magician needs his family, and whether that is just parasocial online friendships or not, you still need sometimes direction and just reinforcement for things you're doing, both good and bad. And so that is part of like these spaces as well, is they wouldn't happen if it's not that I couldn't do them. And it's not even that it wasn't fucking crazy to do them at the very beginning. Like Speculative Gnostic series, Aeon of the Daughter, like what the fuck is that? Especially at that moment where it was pre-election, where everything felt a lot more dark, a lot more rigid, a lot more like the potentiality of the world felt a lot more limited. And now it just feels all bullshit. So what is the perfect time to do a speculative Gnostic series on New America? Because that's really what we're going to be talking about. It's like I've been working a lot with Heidi, as I said. So obviously I think I look at the Mormons and I say, I don't have to agree with them. I'm not a Mormon. I don't want to be a Mormon. But the ideas are fucking interesting. And what he was saying, Joseph Smith was saying, was interesting. And what like some of the Mormons that came after him were interesting. Because once you realize they're just all magicians, that's all it is. Just magicians, and Howard Hughes was a magician. That's why the Mormons loved him. And so you realize that these are people speaking to what they perceive as the host, or the higher power, at least. You kind of realize that maybe they are telling a Gnostic gospel of a kind. Like a normie Mormon might not say that it is, but Heidi says it is, and so I have to go with that, and so does JJ. So it is a kind of Gnosticism. Now, it's really me, Jin, but I'm saying it as a broad overview for the whole lodge. I think an idea, at least percolating, is that Gnosticism isn't not just a kind of episteme of literature or category or knowledge or anything like that. It's really it's engagement with esoteric wisdom science, meaning from any religion. Obviously, I practice Dharma. Obviously, Dharma for me is number one. But I like to think of myself as a speculative Gnostic, because obviously Aeon of the Daughter, Nuria, it all makes sense. But I also think it also makes sense in terms of Hapaborea. and in terms of like the new world, like we really are going to a new aeon, which I do believe. I think we have left Kali Yuga. I can even feel it. There's something that feels different. I'm not saying I was a prophet, nothing like that, but I did mention some ideas that we're going to have to talk about. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
I think there's something really magical about the I don't know whether it's the soil or the kind of or the act of consecration or acts of consecration that occurred on the new in the new world, right? Because I think like even before we get like the sort of like foundational events of Mormonism, I know this is kind of normy, and you might chuckle at this, but I'm thinking even back to sort of like the underlying theology of Methodism, right? And then we see it again in Mormonism, we see it again in like Christian Science, and then all the way to like the sort of emergence of the variety of left-hand path things in the 20th century. I feel like there was a reinvigoration of the idea of essentially the Grail quest, or if you want to frame it another way, the possibility of full divinization, the full like realizing the potential of human beings to go beyond mere humanity and to essentially become gods, right? Like this is a spiritual ambition that was sort of given up in the late medieval period in Europe, and then on through like the Protestant Reformation, and all throughout, right? But it seems to have basically like exploded and hit the ground running in the New World in a really magical way. And so I just kind of want to like, for me, when we're talking about American Gnosticism, it's ambition, it's Luciferian ambition, it's divine ambition is one of its defining characteristics.
Yeah, I again 100% agree with that. Solar, I'll probably borrow at least the framework of that idea eventually, with credit, of course. But yeah, excellent, of course. I totally agree. Yeah, there is a Luciferic element. There's a Luciferic nature in the Constitution. There's a Luciferic sort of idea in the American dream. So it just is what it is. So if you're listening to this and that makes you uncomfortable, I apologize. But at the same time, I don't apologize. It's like sorry, not sorry, because it is, as Solar said, it is just the truth. So we're gonna accept that as part of the part of this series. A part of the, I don't know why I can't speak. A part of this series, what Solar just said. So I will percolate on that while King, please go ahead. Chris, go for it, buddy.
Thank you, Solar. You brought something up I did not think that we was gonna get into right off the bat here. You said you brought up the chalice, and I mean, I am the King of Cups. I mean, that is the whole idea of KOK. And the Branch has heard me say this a lot recently. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this idea of, in the land of aesthetics, this idea of kingdom core or neo-medievalism. So when you're talking about the chase of the Holy Grail, there was it's in the zeitgeist, from Gen Z getting into medieval fashion. You even have Chapel Roan dressing up as Joan of Arc. You have like chainmail fashion. You have these of course, you have video games and Renfell's becoming popular. I just saw the other day videos of like MMA fighting, but in like suits of armor, which is cool. But also there was this more spiritual and political ideas, I guess this dovetails into, where, from my understanding, there was a rejection of the scientific mind in medieval times, of trying to like get back to nature in a way, and kind of reject some of the technological advances of that time. There's kind of like these warning kind of mindsets, and from people I've heard talk about the subject, they have paralleled that to people rebelling against the digital age, the AI age of doing things like homesteading, homeschooling, farmsteading, off-grid farming, getting back to nature, getting old-fashioned flip phones or whatever, and not getting smart devices, like, or as the kids would say, to go out and touch grass, right? So you have that, and the political aspect of it is, I guess, there. I'm not too well versed in medieval history, but again, when this subject has been brought up in videos that I have watched recently, they mentioned around medieval times you had this alleged, from my understanding, alleged political back and forth between Europe and China, and they're paralleling that between what Trump is doing and China today. And my idea of what this kind of kingdom core or uh, neo medievalism, whatever you want to call it, the people that I have heard talk about it seem to be a bit more left leaning. I'm more a centralist, so I'm not like saying that to be derogatory, but it seems like the people that I have seen make videos on this subject view it from a left leaning standpoint. And what I find interesting about that is these are people who are very into technology and crypto and like pop culture and all that. And so I think the whole idea of neo-medievalism being in the digital age is connected to this whole idea of technocracy and the panopticon and these AIs being software being implemented into the government via like Project Stargate or like secretly backdoored through Elon and Doge and all that and all this stuff. So I think our version of medievalism is going to be like a techno kingdom is what I would refer to it as. If you know if it goes that way, we have different paths we can take, and we could rebel against the techno age and go more natural and go back to the roots of stuff, which I think in spaces like that is what we're trying to do. And I think it's just a balance. But that's what, when you brought up this idea of chasing the chalice, it made me think of that.
The thank you, Chris. That was really great. I'm going to let Solar go really quick. I'm just going to say I love the Kingdom Core as an idea. So obviously, I do have critiques of left wing politics, like very strong ones myself. I'm not going to shy away from it, but that's just me personally, of course. I also have a lot of critiques to the right, so it's not, it's not one bird or the other. It's both. So I'm going to let Solar go, but I will make more notes on that later.
Yeah, cool. I just wanted to add one really quick thing since we're talking about this. I didn't anticipate steering us in this direction. We don't have to like follow up. But one interesting thing is that epistemically, I think we're actually on the verge of returning to a much more medieval kind of epistemology in that in the AI era, which we're probably already in insofar as like what I'm about to say. We're going to quickly reach a point, if we're not already there, where the average person simply cannot trust his eyes and ears when it comes to digital media, quote unquote facts, the happenings of the world, right? We, for the past like 150 years, or about 150 years now, since we started to get like instantaneous long-term communication or long-distance communication with like the telegraph and things like that, rapidly expanding, of course, into the early 20th century. We entered this age of essentially like, I don't want to say something as cliche as information overload, but the scope, the horizons of your average person's world expanded exponentially. I mean, that's even underselling it a little bit, right? And so with the sort of perfection of AI, media creation, right? To the point where your average person can't tell the difference between, an actual photograph and AI image, even videos and things like that, right? Like the natural response is going to be to retreat away um, from those types of images and media as verification of reality, right? And so it's going to return to what I saw and then what I heard from someone I trust. And I'm not saying that's going to be totally offline, right? It's definitely going to be mediated through like media networks to some extent, but it's going to look very different than it does now, and in a way that I think like evokes the kind of smaller world horizon of the medieval peasant much more than it evokes the even early 20th century working man picking up the newspaper on his way to the factory shift or whatever, right? That's a pretty profound change.
I 100% agree. Again, I think that the media landscape is about what, like, both the Grey Lodge, Friday Night Gnostic Mass, and this series, Welcome to Hapaborea, is about. It's about the technological and mediatic landscape, because that is, you could say that is the delusional forces in the world. Like, not 100%. Obviously, it's more from you and your perceptions of things. Yes, of course. But those inputs, as Solar mentioned, it's already here. Everything Solar talked about, I know he's trying to be like not utopian or optimistic. I wouldn't say that, but he's trying to be gentle about it, and I appreciate that. But it is here, and he knows that, and I know that, and I think we all know that. And it, you know, the wars are like Ashley and I talked about this. It's like, what are we really seeing on any front? On any front, when they talk about global events, I'm not saying it's not real, but how do we know? How do we know? Like, what are we seeing? I see so much AI videos, and if you played video games for any extent, I'm talking not the new video games, but the even up to PS3. If you were a kid that, like me, who played like tons of different systems, like my parents bought me like all the systems because they, you know, I had to be preoccupied with things. So Neo Geo, I had that. I've had everything. I've had Genesis. I've had SNES. I've had all the PlayStations. I've had all the Saturn. I've had the Dreamcast. I've had them all. So I know. I was a huge gamer, so I get it. Like, reality is completely, especially right now, especially seems to be post-election, but it was actually before that. It was actually a lot before that. But there was still maybe a materiality, a kind of reality that correlated to perception. And since then, it's kind of loosened its perception. Like, we've loosened, right? We've gone into a time of decoherence. And I think we've also been these stages before. Now, in context to the AI age, in context, yeah, the AI age is here. The AI age is the Aeon of the Daughter, but it is what King said. It's literally how we take it. Do we take it as like a process of consciousness where it's like it's about love as the cause of knowledge? Okay, if that's true, then AI can't really be true. Can't be true in a primordial or fundamental sense, not even in a relative sense. Because if you've used AI for any amount of time, it contradicts itself right away. The paradox is, I tried, I really tried. One of our lodge members, Phoebes, he built his own local AI. I tried really hard. I spent literally days talking to it, trying to teach it Kabbalah, trying to teach it like deeper ideas. It can, there is a, it, there's a memory, but it's not really an understanding, in my opinion. Maybe the commercial AIs are shit, and that's just my experience. And the like secret like Palantir AIs are just so great. I'm not tech optimist. I'm really not. I'm really a lot more like, they're gonna burn out the devices. They're gonna burn out the Rahu. And I mean, I'll say that. Like, I don't care. Like, I do believe that. and I just don't believe that the devices can handle like what they're trying to do with them. But I also think the point that Chris made about the medievalism is really interesting, because yes, there is a kind of road to serfdom, and yes, I did make that guy cry on a live, but there is a kind of road to serfdom uh, that is that's talking about, and this is something Ashley and I also spoke about. This is something Solar knows actually, also because I've also spoken about it in the lodge and then just very briefly with him, but I know that he understands. Is that in a lot of the left hand path magic, there is an explicit left wing political. There's an explicit left wing political agenda, whatever you want to call that. And I'm not saying it's necessarily even like I'm not. I would say I'm on the right, if only because I don't want to be associated with the left. This is how I feel inside. After COVID, after everything, like I can't handle it. I can't handle like the lies. I can't handle the false empathy. I have to live in the here and now. And I think what I've learned doing these spaces and like speaking with all of you, and how much we were forged in fire, at least at my perception, right, through the last few months, especially January, February, I realized that like there is a radical libertarian, I'm using that in quotes, but it's really more of a, it's not really anarchist, because there is like higher power, there's other power, there's things that, there's higher oaths, higher commitments. So it's not 100% that, but there is something radically about yourself. Rectification happens in yourself. It's something that you have to do. It's not something people can do for you. And it is really about how you manage all of these forces, both the forces that are, you could say, polluting, the externalities, or the things that you perceive, right? It's both. So the inputs have to sort of be synthesized with the outputs, or at least brought into a measure of loving kindness. It's a good way to temper any excess fire, right? But really, all things are also rectified in Yesod. So, but that also, you have to have a good foundation before you really can understand what you're seeing. You have to have like a solid base. I use the metaphor of the desk, or the chair, seated at a desk. Well, the chair has four pillars, seat of the world. So you can't, if your chair is rickety, your signature is going to look like shit. The thing is, it's not coherent. It's in discoherence. So in a time of decoherence or discoherence, we need to be in greater perception, greater coherence, greater rectification. Those things are going to be more important than ever. And I always emphasize this, like, processes of the truth are, like Solar said, less important. No, they are extremely important, but they are not so external. It's going to be about sadhana. It's going to be about spiritual practices. It's going to be about, I don't want to be Age of Aquarius, but there is a psychic element to Aeon of the Daughter. There just is. I mean, it is Age of Aquarius in a way. It's just not, we didn't take it in a sicko, like, annihilate the world way. And I'm not saying destruction isn't part of creation. Of course. I understand that. It's a very fundamental Kabbalistic principle. It's a very fundamental idea in general. Like the tohu and the tikkun, and it, like where those things begin and end, and how you're bringing it into synthesis, and how you're rectifying it, and what you're rectifying, that all matters. And yes, Chris, I'm so sorry. I see your hand. I was kind of going. Please go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this, I'm so fascinated with this topic. I mean, even my slogan for my channel is movies are the modern myth. And the reason why I chose that that tagline, one, because it's alliteration, and I love alliteration, and you got the 33 symbolism in it. But also, my whole channel is kind of rectifying this idea that, at least in the West, in modern society with America, there really isn't myths. We don't have permanent myths that we don't have that are like foundational, really. Yeah, we have like Native Americans and all this, but as far as like, you know, the what we see as like the settlers and everything when they came and founded America, there isn't like a naturalistic shamanic root foundation kind of system set up. And that's why we in modern times it's so easy for us to look at movies and why people say things like superheroes or Greek gods and everything. And I'm glad you brought up pillars, because as far as like Hyperborea and the North Star, going back to like a medieval myth, the idea of the princess in a tower is, I think, Jen, you would refer to it as this daughter of Aeon. Mario of Symbolic Study would refer to it as like a polar goddess, but that I would see it as the goddess of the pole star is this princess in the tower of these like medieval kind of folk tales and everything, and that is kind of like the middle. That tower is, of course, it's not the left pillar, it's not the right pillar, it's usually the invisible third pillar, right? The middle pillar. And to kind of connect this back to Americana kind of stuff, I've heard someone say years ago, there was I forget his name, it was some researcher, one of you might have came across this as well, probably. He was saying that because there isn't not any root shamanistic foundation myths for America, ours is actually, he theorized it as Lovecraft was our Lovecraftian lore, was America's kind of shamanistic root foundation of myths. Whether I agree with that, I could go both ways with it, right? But let's just look at it for a second, and that's why I brought up my first video with Mario from Friendless Lovecraft, because in that video we go over all these examples. I even have a book called The Medial Afterlives of H.P. Lovecraft, and it's an academic book that came out a year or two ago that chronicles every cross-platform, from books to movies and to podcasts and video games, that have been influenced by Lovecraftian lore, and how after Lovecraft died, that's when like this whole Lovecraft religion had kind of took off. And he just kind of reskinned Sumerian myths and Sumerian lore to like this very kind of like primordial, dark, gothic, like under oceanic kind of aesthetic. And it's because he was in the industrial age. He was in an industrial cityscape, seeing the Western world go from a naturalistic kind of world to be covered in smog and factories and everything. And he wrote about Polaris a lot, even on the cover of Gates of the Necronomicon. He has Polaris on the cover of it. Some say Simon, the author of the Necronomicon and the Gates of the Necronomicon, was Lovecraft himself. Some say it wasn't him. Who knows? But he uses Polaris as well. So I think it's it's interesting to see all of this. And as I'm Gen Z, and I see other Gen Z young adults around my age and even younger who are more chronically online than I am, who are just, and they don't think about like esoteric topics, the more, I guess, the term we would use as normies, right? And they just play video games or watch movies or read books or whatever, and their philosophy is this very much doom and gloom, kind of nihilistic kind of outlook, uh, kind of like a cosmic abandonment, which is a theme in Lovecraft. Um, and I think they get it from the media. They pick up this Lovecraftian way of thinking from their media, from their video games, from their books and comics and graphic novels and podcasts and all this and that. And they similarly feel abandonment and disconnected from God and spirit and everything, because they're surrounded by all this technology, technological like 5G smog, where Lovecraft was doom and gloom and nihilistic because he was surrounded by actual smoke, smog, factory smog, and everything. So I think that's a really interesting thing to look at, is this idea of Lovecraft being Americana myth.
I'm gonna let Sol. Thank you, Chris, so much. That was obviously great, and I agree with a lot of that, and I have notes about it. Um, I will just say really quick before Solar goes is that what I think is different about the Aeon of the Daughter, and you did encapsulate it very well with the Maiden in the Tower, and I just want to shout out Avi. Dakini from the Lodge. Thank you so much for coming. We see you. We appreciate you so much. I actually wondered where you were. So I'm sure you were working or doing something important, but we see you, hear you. We're so glad you're here in Synthesis and through time and space with us. Appreciate it. But the Aeon is dancing, as I have always said. She's liberated from the tower, but she's liberated from the tower by her self-arising nature. So in a way, she's kind of in her own will. That's why she can stand on the dragon. She's no longer in the Tower of Great Destruction. She is the Aishath, Zanunim, but she's also the Babylon, but she's not quite the Babylon mother. She's not the horror. She is she's post-conceptual. The seeds are made anew in her flame. That's kind of the idea. So, anyways, I'm sorry. Solar, please go ahead. I know you've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up dancing, right? Because I'm a bit of a dancer myself. I like this as a motif. To kind of unify the two strands of comments here. I feel like the closest thing we have to a universal American myth is a story that is repeated 1,000 times. The version that sticks in my head because it came out when I was, in a formative period of my life, is the movie There Will Be Blood. And I'm not going to rehash it because where I'm going with this is so obvious. But in short, right, the main character, Daniel Plainview, he sort of like dances through multiple sort of interpretive schemas in a way completely cynically and non-committally, right? Like he conscripts the kid to be his son, right, to play for sympathy. He goes a little bit into the religious bit, right, to be able to sort of parlay with the congregation whose land he wants to exploit for oil rights or oil exploration, right? And in the end, he achieves the kind of like apotheosis, right? A sort of like self-divinization, right? Where he sort of goes beyond um, the limitations of society completely, right? He's fantastically wealthy. He's no longer dependent on people in a direct way. And again, maybe the homesteader is a more complete sort of version of this archetype, where Daniel Plainview, like, it never really, it's not as though he grows his own food, but he's just so phenomenally wealthy that it doesn't matter, right? And similarly, he's completely beyond what we might call like normie ethics and societal restraint, right? And he's just kind of like dancing on top of the world, right? And he sort of ascends to a point where he becomes a god, right? But the kind of god that he is something of a like Lovecraftian horror, right? He's as much sort of demonic as he is divine, right? He is he is a creature in and of himself and unto himself, right, and no one else. And yeah, and just kind of like that is the theme. It's to go sort of like beyond society and beyond man. That's the, I don't know, and in a very almost like asocial, not antisocial per se, and an independence from the sort of concerns of others, the views of others, etc. Like that is like the American dream, sort of in a spiritual sense, right?
Yeah, of course. That was great, honestly. I do want to say one thing. Is that I obviously Sailor and I are both big Don Webb fans. I think Don Webb's great. He was talking about parafiction way before Nick Land. Just saying. But I think, well, it's true. I mean, all of that stuff from the new school, like I like all of that. Obviously, it's really interesting ideas that they're putting in, like sort of an academic formulation. But all these things are much older than. I mean, not maybe that's the primordial myth, is that, and not just of America but of the whole world, right? I think something we talk a lot about in relation to Kabbalah is that, like, what is the word, how is it expressed, how is it captured, how does it transcend, how is it liberated, how is it broken, how is it renewed, how is it rectified, how is it created. I mean, that's a big part of all of this, right? So maybe the primordial word is the creation of the story, is the creation of the narrative, is like how we put it in, how we understand it. So our relationship with both the text and the story and the ideas and the words themselves. Maybe that's all like our stories are for. And there's nothing wrong with that, because those things can be true and not true, fictional and real, both at the same time, because it's really about consciousness, as long as you're aware of it. But I do want to, as much as I love Don Webb and I love some of that, we'll call it left hand path, not necessarily leftist, but left hand path. Well, he would not say he's leftist, but a left hand path material, and their love of Lovecraft, is that I actually prefer, so Jin, this is just me, I'm not saying all of you have to prefer, but I prefer Conan the Barbarian in relation to the new American Gnosticism, or Hapaborea. That, for me, I draw more inspiration from that. So it's related to Mario's idea, obviously, of the Hyperborean kingdom. But the reality also is that in Tantra, we have the primordial pole star goddess. She exists, no problem. But we also understand the daughter as something new. She's self-arising Dakini. She comes through the carnal ground of her own power, her own will. She's of the mother, she's of the grandmother. She's something different. It's not in ferociousness. It's not in pacification. It's in red. It's in magnetization and true love. And you will say, "Oh, the mother can embody that." Yes, of course, but it's different. It just is different. It's a different archetype. It's a different way that the paths work together, and where they bring you is different. And it is also synthesis between Netzach and Hod. So you're immediately talking about a relationship with the sun, with this kind of apotheosized hero villain. That's what sort of Christ, you could think of it in one way, a very Catholic, maybe Catholic Kabbalah way. He reaches apotheosis at Tiferet, but then part of him falls down. Falls down where? Well, falls down into the abyss, sealing the abyss like a cork. Right? And then part of his consciousness raises up, right? The crown of thorns, he raises up to death and receives the Holy Spirit. Or maybe I'm kind of conflating Orthodox Kabbalah and Catholic Kabbalah, as I am wont to do sometimes, but I think it makes sense in both ways. And even if it's not 100% technically, precise, which I do seek to do, but I think in this case it's okay to speak more broadly. But I want to also say that I do think, and I don't think this is a shock to anyone, I do think that there is like an innate, I know Solar's gonna be like, Jin. I do think there's an innate goodness to people. I know it sounds really fucking naive after all the things we've been through, but I just want to say that. So I do think that we can be post-conceptual in our ethics, in the sense that we can like say what has come before, that's fine. But like also let's look at like what's fucking practical for right now, because we're sort of in an unprecedented moment. Maybe not in all of history, because history is a fucking cycle. We live in a divine Leela, a divine play, you know. So we've probably been here before. It's just like Battlestar Galactica. That's what I always say in the group chat. It's just like fucking just watch fucking Battlestar Galactica 2004 and you will understand the world. That's it. We live in a cycle and we play things out. But I think we also get to choose. And I think that's what Aeon of the Daughter is about also, because we are also we also embody the daughter in our consciousness. It's our love over will. It's our love over the dragon. So I think that you have to say that there is a part of the, like there is a, there is a kind of vibe shift to use that phrase, where we all recognize in perception that we can, yeah, we can all love each other. That's okay. That's not gay, dippy, hippie shit. That's actually like maybe more fundamental to human experience than ever before. Yes, Solar, please go ahead, and I apologize.
No, you're good. I think, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So I think one of the key distinctions here, right, is the nature of will and the nature of consciousness, and you have two very different sort of priors that are feeding into this. So where you're coming from, and as you know, right, I'm a Dzogchen guy, I'm a Zazen guy, me as well, right? Like we see this in terms of bodhicitta and sort of the other main strain feeding into this, and sort of the I'm sort of misusing this term of daemonic, um, but this much more like sort of like egoistic and cruel sensibility is ultimately of the will and sort of like the deified human is ultimately downstream from Calvinist assumptions about human nature, right? This is all downstream from Tulip. And I think it's important to keep in mind the sort of like intellectual tradition that you're tapping into, even though like contemporary left-hand path people or fucking like Ayn Rand, they're not citing like Calvinist theology when they're sort of conceiving of this sort of like egoistic like God man, right? But like at a fundamental level, like that is the heritage of that set of assumptions of what constitutes the individual, the sort of interest of the individual's orientation towards the other, right? And in fact, I would go back to like I would point out, for instance, like the default quote unquote Aryan, if we're going to go there, right? Like the default Aryan orientation towards like other living creatures is actually one more of bodhicitta than it is cruelty. Now, we might say there's like, we can get into some like finer details there of this sort of this sort of aristocratic indifference, right? But I think that it's over the sort of cruel element of that becomes exaggerated, becomes overemphasized in an interpreter like Nietzsche and derivative thinkers, right, like that, right? Like they're getting sort of further and further away from the actual sort of orientation that the Aryan has towards life, and life like capital L, as in all living beings, etc. Right? There's a much more like holistic embrace of life and one's place in it, even as a would-be god that we see, and I think that to me, like bodhicitta really speaks where these ideas come from, like in mind.
Sorry, Soul, you cut out right at the end there, but it was actually really good reception for like 90, we'll say not wild joke, 99%. So, but the majority it was very clear. So thank you for that. I'm really glad that I'm gonna let Chris go in a moment. I'm really glad you made that distinction, because I've been thinking tulip in my head the entire time since you first engaged with that idea of the Luciferianism, because I think this, Solar, because you've obviously listened to me before, I have pinpointed like this kind of tulip Calvinist inclination for a lot of, I don't know if it's a problem, but it seems to lead to some bad conclusions. I don't like it Kabbalistically. I don't think it's totally logical. It doesn't really make sense to the experiences I've had. It doesn't really make sense to the other wisdom texts I've read. It doesn't make sense to, obviously, you laid it out. It's, you have to delineate it and distinguish it from a Buddhist view. And I'm glad you brought up the Aryan point, because even if you just take it on a conceptual non-racial layer, like Arya, it means noble. Arya Tara, Arya Kurkula. I mean, you sure, you could say that makes them belong to those tribes or peoples, and sure, that's no problem. I think you know this. I try and, especially for Hapaborea, I think of things in a syncretic, like things are moving in that direction that they were moving in like 1100 years ago with Tantra. Like we're moving in a syncretic way, so maybe it's okay now to criticize that Calvinist inclination, because yeah, we have the ideas of Buddhism in the West. We have these ideas of like Jewish mysticism. We have all the, we have the corpus of we'll say loving kindness texts now. So this is not about being hippie or like, I'm more of an isolationist, like legit. Like I've really thought about it. I think turn your back on the old world shit. Like I can't be engaged in that. I really cannot. Even if it was Indonesia, even if it was Asia, I would, you know, we're here now, and it's like Solar said, it's something magic. There's something fucking magic. This is the, it's the Gumshan, it's the Gold Mountain. This is what people have been talking about for like I don't know, like 400 or 500 years. This is like the place where everybody left everything to fucking come to. And it's like they tell you as soon as you walk in, it's like if you build it, then this is what it can be. This is who you can be. No, no, there's nowhere else in the world was that even an idea. Okay, yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Yeah, that I like what you ended there with, Jen, about the American dream. I find the American dream so inspirational, and one of my grievances with modern day Hollywood is it's so pessimistic, it's so nihilistic. You can't have a idealistic kind of inspirational story really more in mainstream Hollywood. Uh, Brett, Pop Culture Crisis, makes the he kind of jokingly says the reason why we can't get a good baseball movie anymore is because we don't, the American dream is kind of, dead in a way. That Hollywood has turned its back on this idea of the American dream, so they can't create any more good baseball movies like Field of Dreams or The Sandlot, which are really, look at like The Sandlot and like Stand By Me or Field of Dreams. These are, again, those are kind of myths that go through rites of passage for boys and everything. And we can't really, it's hard for uh, these corporate entities to fund movies that spark that American kind of dream in their storytelling. They can't craft it, it seems like. But hopefully that's turning around soon with this whole vibe shift that I know that, as Jin said, that we all are feeling right now. Um, I know you wasn't speaking of like Tulip the Flowers, but I thought it would be interesting to note that depending on where you are, of course, in the world, um, but in America, tulip season is over. So you should be digging up all your tulips and your bulbs right now and getting ready for your summer florals and everything. And I just saw a bunch of people digging up their garden and everything to kind of make way for their summer things, and they had all their you know, dead tulips, essentially. So I thought that was interesting. But what I wanted to say to kind of weave in here is, as far as looking at other films and ideas for the this Americana kind of foundational shamanism, I think of in school they showed multiple times my class on like a rainy day this Disney movie called Tall Tale, which is kind of like a kid version of the movie Urban Legend, where they go through like all the urban legends that were like, and it was like a Sasha film. Where Tall Tale is like the same thing, but it's about a kid going through all these tall tales, where it's like um, Paul Bunyan and like Johnny Appleseed, and you know, you got the you got your Blue Ox and all this and that. So I think there's something a bit of Americana with that as well as this new age of urban legends. Um, like one that I find interesting is the idea of the dead prom queen, right? We have this like urban legend of like the girl that died on prom night, and this idea of like lover lanes areas, like a lot of lovers lanes areas around the world, um, or not around the world, around America, I mean, uh, seem to be haunted or have some kind of paranormal activity around it. Um, and if you're unfamiliar with what a lover's lane is, that is a term that was popularized by these like very Americana like sitcoms and movies, with things like Leave It to Beaver, or Pleasantville, Fathers Know Best. It's like in a small town around like the Americana 1950s, the peak of the American dream. They would and when teen culture was popping off, which teens aren't real. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but teens aren't real. Teens are a myth within themselves. They're false. Teens were invented. Teen culture was invented. But when teen culture came about in the 50s, the kids would drive around in your car to listen to radio, go on dates, and they would usually park in a certain area that would usually refer to as like a lovers lanes area, where they would like park and like make out and listen to the radio and everything. And a lot of these areas, there are stories of aliens, UFOs, Bigfoots, zombies, whatever, and some kind of phenomenon, high strangeness, where some kind of entity would be watching these teens make out, and it's because they're using their sexual energy, right? So it's invoking, and teen after teens going in this same spot to uh, feel the flame of desire, as one would say. um, they are stirring up energy in that location. So these lover lanes areas, even though that American dream culture is kind of shifted away from that kind of archetype, um, these areas still have energy stirred up. And so I find that super interesting. Um, the last thing I'll say before I uh, pass the mic on, is there is another film I find interesting, and that is a film by Wim Winters. It's called Paris, Texas, and it's referenced in many um, music videos, cultures, memes, everywhere. Even if you don't recognize it, you will recognize it. Beyonce used it. She invoked the film Paris, Texas in her pseudo country album. Uh, Paris, Texas was also said to be Kurt Cobain's favorite movie, and he invoked the movie a lot. Even the MAGA red hats invoked the red hat from Paris, Texas, the film. And what's interesting about the film is Wim Wenders wasn't from America, but he came to America and he traveled throughout the South and across Texas, and he didn't have a script, but he let the land tell the story, and he kind of came up with this idea on the spot, and it's a very shamanic tell, and it's this backdrop of Texas in the it was made in 1984, so Texas 1984, and he noticed that around Texas you would have all these like Americana, American Dream, 1950s trucks and billboards and buildings, but they was all abandoned and they was all like like rotting and rusting and falling apart now. And so he used that as a backdrop for his story, and it's really about how the American family unit had kind of fallen apart. And it's about the main character Travis walking through the desert, going on this shamanic journey, and he gets rebirth in this shamanic way, and he has to get out of the desert and reconnect his um, son with his wife, find both of them, reconnect the family, and go through this like shamanic journey across the Americana landscape. And it's a very shamanic kind of film, and it's very symbolic, and it's very like Jen, I'm sure that you would talk about like the paths of the Sephiroth with it. It's such an interesting film to see. So if Americana did have a myth in the film world, I would say possibly. I would say Paris, Texas could be one of them.
Awesome. Thank you so
Can you
much.
guys hear me all right?
Yeah, Solar, please go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. Sorry, I just want to jump in because I think the Zog helicopters are closing in. I might not be able to hold out for too much longer. Yeah. So I just wanted to draw a mythopoetic equivalent here between the lover slain, like in the idealized 50s, right, of the trope, and the sort of exile of young men into the Mannerbund, like area. Where the initiate, the young man, is exiled, put beyond this sort of authority.
Solar, you are kind of breaking up, but we actually got a really good snippet just now where you're talking about the young man exiled beyond authority. That was a really great point, and that was clear, but then obviously Zog got you. So, okay, yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, that was really funny. Hey, Chris, you had a lot to say right there. Have you had a lot of caffeine or something?
Hey, I might be hyper, but I'm not going to bore you guys.
Da-dun. We had that one set up. Just waiting for the right opportunity. So, hey, I wanted to ask about the land of the plumed serpents or feathered serpents. So, isn't that what America is kind of the name of it kind of means? There's like this serpentine element to it, right? And Chris and I have been talking a lot about like the Orphic egg and the Orpheus type cults. And so there's like this snake and egg kind of thing. And you can find that effigy in Ohio. There's like the serpent mound and it's eating an egg. So I was just curious if you guys had anything to comment on there, because I know there's a lot of serpent stuff in the Eastern traditions.
I just want to welcome Allison. Allison's one of my personal favorite, just like aesthetic, spiritual, religious posters. So let me just say that. So welcome, Allison. I invited you to speak. If you want to speak, you can. If you don't want to, that's okay. But I just want you to know that you're an honorary co-host, because we appreciate you and we see you. We're in space together through time. That's pretty cool. It's magic, right? Also, yeah, okay, so that was a great question, Joshua, about the mounds. So this is something obviously JJ Vance, Operation GCD, calls himself not the vice president. He often talks about this, so I cannot take credit for a lot of my kind of thinking and knowledge around it. And we also should shout out our fallen soldier, hypothetical, right? Solar Exile. He's obviously a major component of the lodge and a co-host to these spaces. So he is camping with his dad. So that's great mythopoesis just right there. But okay, so the mounds. So obviously, I've thought a lot about this. I've kind of formulated opinions based around being with JJ and obviously podcasting a lot with him. So, in my opinion, you're right. America is the land of the feathered serpent. It's like it's the syncretism, the synthesis of the Naga and the Garuda. It's like both of those things at the same time. Well, what is the Naga? The Naga is the keeper of the secret texts. What is the Garuda? The Garuda is the keeper of the laws of civilization. So both of those things have to come together. It's neither an extreme. It's neither like right-handed or left-handed. It's like, I can't remember if it was Chris or Joshua. I'm sorry, I apologize. But yeah, it's like the daughter's on Yesod. She can get to death because she's the threshold, right? That's the whole idea. Sailor Moon and the Crystal Millennium Kingdom, because I'm looking at Cassandra's PFP right now. But I know it's not technically Sailor Moon. It is her daughter, Chibi. But, we're going to go with the metaphor. Obviously, Sachki's obviously an honorary lodge member. And so that's what it is. It's sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. It's a dancing girl, right? It comes in and out of focus like the light, because that's what the truth is. It's both relative and primordial at the exact same time. So yeah, sometimes you're in it, sometimes you're not. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So mounds. Okay, I know you're ready to go, Joshua. I'm sorry. Mounds. Okay, so I was waiting for this for a live, but I guess this is a live, and I guess this is kind of not my live necessarily, but it is a live that I am a axial member of. So I think that there's an idea of like those ferocious deities that appear before you. A lot of like upasikas, magicians, all of that occultists discuss it. I think it's really those things are part of consciousness, like imprints left on these the mounds are all built on ley lines. If you look at the mounds and where they're positioned, they're always in interesting places. It's always in like Cairo or I don't know, like all these like it's all biblical and Egyptian names. It's all Levantine and like Central Asian and all these names that it's obvious that they map the old world onto the new. They saw geographic, and Mormons were talking about this. They saw geographic similarity as they traversed through. And right, they didn't just stop in Utah, which is the home of the Aztecs, interestingly enough. Right? I bring this up so many times, Ashley. You're probably so tired of me saying this. But yeah, it is interesting that some band of Utes walked down to Mexico based on a vision. Like that's where they started, was like in Utah, where the Mormons thought was like the origin of the world, was where the world pillar is. That's kind of interesting. And like why can't America be why can't it be where the world pillar is? So what? Maybe it is. I'm not saying it is. I'm just, as a conceptual idea, I think it's interesting. Like, why not? Why is there all this mythos about mountains? What do we know about mountain mythos? Mountains are obviously Mount Meru. It's like it's the primordial world axis. So there's a lot of mythologies, whether we say they're millenarian or not, that obviously have to do with America and like what the land is here, and like Trump saying Greenland, and they're saying like 51st state. Whether that's just a speculative or real idea, obviously I have my fingers crossed. I think it'll be true. But So, but I've said this before on these spaces, so that's not really a surprise to anyone that I think that. But even as a speculative idea, I think it's interesting. I think, like, what is the manifest destiny of Turtle Island? You might think Turtle Island is cringe, but there is an element of that sort of. You could call it like softcore decoloniality almost. Like, it's very tame, very mild. We're not going far left with our politics. We're just, we're kind of looking at these ideas that are more popular among a certain crowd, but we're, we don't have to interpret it exactly like that. We can interpret it according to our own metrics, right? So I think there's something interesting about that. I think there's also something interesting about what Chris said about, like, yeah, the shamanic journey of America. The shamanic journey of America is fucking Carlos Castaneda. It's Timothy Leary. It's Alan Watts. That's the shamanic journey. It's like the things. But it's also you. It's you in space right now. Like, you can have that. You can do all that stuff that they did, but you don't have to either. You can sort of, like I'm saying, this is not a trans. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. So just totally take it for what it is. I don't think of this as Aeon as transgressive. I think you're taking the ideas, maybe, that are transgressive. Maybe you're taking the ideas from these grimoires or these people that, probably didn't use them in the right way. You're just taking it as conceptual tools. Just thinking, right? And then you're going to apply it to, like, the higher wisdom practices. That's it. It's not about, like, being transgressive or going to extremes. I'm really feeling very yesodic, feeling very synthesis, feeling very middle pillar, maybe even a little tiferatic today. So I will say that. So I just feel like we can discard without denying. We can say, yeah, there's great wisdom texts that came before. There's all this, tons of experiential and textual wisdom to draw from. But we don't have to, we don't have to be married to it. And that's sort of a Dharmic idea too, is that we can just be flexible and just be dancing and not be so concerned about traditionalism or covenant or whatever. It's not about that. It's not real. Of course, everyone knows I like Christian Kabbalah the most, but I do like Hasidic Kabbalah too. I like both because it's interesting, right? And you can understand actually both systems from both ways. That's what's kind of interesting. It's something's very fundamental and very universal. And I'm not even saying that I personally believe that, because obviously I'm not a Christian. If I wanted to be a Christian, I just would. I would just, like, say to you guys, I'm Christian. I'm not. But I don't have no problem with it. I've always said that. I think I've been very clear. Kabbalistically makes 100% sense to me. Now, do I inherently agree with the conclusion? No. My ideas are different. But I think that that's also allowed for in the Aeon. We can have slightly divergent ideas and still kind of have the overarching theme of bodhicitta, middle pillar, synthesis, non-dualism. That sounds like a recipe for success, in my opinion. Okay, please, Joshua, you've been really patient. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, wanted to first welcome Allison. But I wanted to also mention that the Serpent Mound in Ohio is located within a meteor impact crater. And so there you can also find a naturally occurring quartz that has been smashed and compressed greatly. I can't remember. I think it's called shatter quartz or something like that. There's some name for it. But anyway, because of the meteor hitting so hard, things that would normally be very deep kind of got compressed and brought to the surface. So it's an area rich in all sorts of things like that, where you can just find it all over the place. And but anyway, because of the hit too, there's naturally occurring springs. So if you visit that area, you can drink from the springs, which tastes great. There's also a rich Native American type culture there even though some of the people aren't necessarily natives themselves. I mean, we're all native if we live here, right? But I mean, hearkening back to that tradition. So I would encourage you guys to go. And if you do go, let me know, and I can try to even get you the sweat lodge ritual I got to participate in. There's people there that have like sweat lodges and stuff built, and they take water from the spring and you drink it. And then when you go in, to the sweat lodge, they're putting that water on the fire, and the stones represent like grandfather, the water's grandmother, that sort of thing. But anyway, it was a really interesting experience to go there and really take it in and absorb it and get to know the people and eat with them and stuff. It was really wild. But I just wanted to mention that was a meteor impact crater, so I didn't know if that would add anything to it, the symbolism or not. But obviously, the effigy was built after the impact. But something drew those people to that location. You mentioned how these things are built on certain energy lines or whatever, but whatever happened there had been uh, a lot of pressure had been put down on all that quartz. And so, quartz vibrates and emits like a piezoelectric effect whenever it's compressed. So that area probably does emanate a lot of strange energy, I'd imagine.
I'm going to let you go, Chris, but I just want to respond to a few things Joshua said. So that was great, Joshua. Thank you so much for obviously you are co-host, so I should thank you so much, but I appreciate it. At any rate, and no, you're right, and I'm trying to say that I'm just clumsily getting there. So when people talk about Quicksilver, I know this sounds like very weird, but just think of Quicksilver. Like think of the gift. Think of like the liquid like pouring through. Like when you hear that in alchemical text, that can also mean other things. It doesn't just mean alchemical Quicksilver. It can also refer to that process of consciousness, that lightning strike of perception. It also can refer to diamond thunder, just like why is the quartz being compressed and the sound it emits. What sound is it? Maybe it's an invisible sound, maybe it's invisible words. All accounted for. All these ideas are already accounted for. So I agree. But what I'm saying about the Quicksilver is that you could even think of that as like energy streams that go throughout the world, but are particularly concentrated on. Well, if you think of the world in like as a turtle, maybe not the whole world, but at least where most of us live, it's more interconnected, right? We're on a shell that's interconnected. Everything has lines. There's a grid pattern, but it's really a circle. So this is obviously a very Masonic idea, like squaring the circle, and that maybe is not exactly one to one the same idea as what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like primordial lines that just exist. Maybe they do shift and change. Maybe people can shift and change them. I think that's a really interesting idea. Is like depending on the architecture that you build, maybe they do shift, or maybe there's this idea in the pole shifting where that maybe the pole shift is very, very minute. Maybe we don't fully, maybe we're not in clarity of like what is actually going on or what actually is happening with that. But when it shifts, maybe they do shift as well. But it seems like these places are places where there's energy running through. So that's what I'm talking about, the Quicksilver. So you'll hear about this a lot about Mexico. They'll say, oh, Quicksilver was running through. Whether that's true or not true is really immaterial, because simply the idea of that means that these are places that are sort of formed to have higher spiritual experiences. Now, because most of what happens in a spiritual experience is through your own will, through your own power, through your own, as I said, love, and your own system, like how are you getting to where you want to go? It's more than just the places. It requires more than just the place. You have to have know-how, whether that's technical or just experiential or whatever. Like people who go to who are like in like the snake cults. I mean like the snake handling cults. that's very surgical. That's like very magical. I could see that happening like 2,000 years ago with some of the Gnostics. Like it's clearly something that's reoccurred, right? It's one of those Leela things that you see these same tendencies come and go, and different factions, or they seem different, that are fighting. But really, it's like this is just the movements of history. This is just the cycles, how it happens, and how people choose to play out. So, my whole point is that you can go to the site and you can think you're really spiritual and think you're going to get there. And I'm not saying you won't, but I'm just saying that it's not this, the site itself does not inherently maybe make it easier, better, stronger, more profound. It's still about you, but the site can maybe help you penetrate, or the densities, or go up a little higher, or you can use a little bit of that reservoir, I guess, if you know how to draw from it. But you're also impacted by the people that have done the exact same thing. So that's what I was saying about like the ferocious gods. Maybe that's someone else's thought form, and maybe being on the ley line, it appears so much more scarier, so much more clearer. So I just want to say that too. Like I'm not about worshiping either nature or science, either Hode or Netzach. I love and appreciate those things, but I like the middle pillar. So I think that we have to be a little more mature than that. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. Okay, please, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting you ended what you were saying, Jen, about with the word pillar, because yesterday I sat by and visited a pillar in my region, a obelisk, and sat by it, and I kind of just sat there, and I actually was recording my thoughts and everything, and I sent it to the branch because we had an ongoing thread, and I sat in that area, and it was interesting. And uh, so just a small connection there. Uh, but yeah, this whole idea of Americana mysticism, you know, I've had my own experience when I was younger. Um, a friend of mine, when I was in elementary school, he invited me over to stay the night at his house, and his family owned a farm. And in the morning, his older brother and dad woke up, and they was going to go hunting on their land. They had on their land there were some woods, and they was going to go hunting on the land. And they asked if we wanted to go in. It was the first time I ever went hunting, and we had a BB gun. It was me, my friend. Again, we was in elementary school, like first, second grade, maybe third grade actually, but we was fairly young. Um, yeah, I think it was more around third grade. But anyway, that's not the point. We was young. That's the point. Um, and we went and was going to go hunting, and his dad and older brother went to the left in the woods, and we went to the right, and we was just following like squirrels and rabbits, hunting small game and everything, because we just had a small BB gun. And I remember this vividly. My friend went off a few feet ahead of me, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to come and look at this." And I went over to where he was, and in this area of trees in the shadows was like this very generic almost cartoonish apparition of a Native American spirit, like headdress and everything, and it was shimmering, it had glowing eyes. But what made it interesting that scared us was he had a pole stuck through his chest that was like impelled him, and it was uh, through the tree, like he was like almost like someone hit him with some kind of spear, and it went through him, and then it hit the tree, and his spirit was just lingering on this tree. It was almost kind of like if you ever seen the anime uh, Inuyasha with at the beginning where he's stuck to the tree. It was almost like that. But it freaked us out, and it was the fastest I've ever ran in my life.
Dude, you gave me
And
chills.
we ran out of the woods, through his barn, through his farmland, and into the back of his back door to his house, where his mother was making breakfast for our return, and we was just mumbling and mumbling and mumbling and just like going on and on, like we just saw this thing in the woods, and we was all freaked out. She had to call her husband, and he came back and everything, and his dad and brother went back the next day where we said we was to check out, and of course they didn't see anything. But that was one of the early experience I've had from a young age that made me interested in, you know, the paranormal and the occult and all these topics, right? um and so I went, head first into those kind of topics. And me and my friend, we went separate ways. We got into different classes growing up, different friend groups. And then when I graduated high school, we reconnected, and we was like going, sharing memories of what we did when we was younger. And I shared him that memory. I was, hey, you remember that time we saw a Native American apparition? And he freaked out. And he was like, oh, yeah, but my dad went back there the next day. He didn't say anything. So it was just our kid imagination. Like, he completely rejected this idea of our shared experience. So we went down two different roads. Like, he was freaked out about it with age, but with age with me, I was interested, and I was like, I went down the rabbit hole, as one would say. Um, and I've noticed this, like talking with family members about spiritual ideas is kind of taboo now. Like, most of my family identifies as Christians, but if I bring up like Nephilim and these kind of Christian mysticism kind of topics, um, they look at me strangely, or they kind of reject this idea of this mystical side to Christianity almost. And it's, um, I find it challenging, but it's interesting paralleling that to this idea of Christian mysticism and everything. And also, the last thing I wanted to say on the topic of Luciferianism, that's definitely Lady Liberty, like Goddess Columbia, right? As well.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That was really great. I agree with you, and I think, yeah, obviously, Lady Liberty. That's what it is. I mean, she's holding the Luciferic flame. I mean, it's the light that illuminates the Netzach.
You stay away from her, Bobby Boucher.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what it's Path 22, right? It's justice. So you can say it's like there. It has to be like they always love the formation of trinities, right? So it would be like justice, liberty, and the other one, whatever Columbia represents. You guys know I'm not good at the Greek stuff, so I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to front. So, but I did have something. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah. So on that topic, I had some notes. So this is an excellent opportunity to maybe bring this up. So you mentioned colors earlier, and so the red, white, and the blue of the flag, which I know is shared with other countries like Russia, but I think that sometimes the flag of a country is very important. And so I think what the red, white, and blue kind of represents, because I've noticed that the key to the tarot, the teeth of the key are red, white, and blue. And so, in a way, they unlock something. And so, I think when we're governed under this flag, which was like established with certain principles and stuff. In other words, it's an egregor, it's a servitor or something. So really, on the back of the turtle, so to speak, is also true to say that we're part of an egregor, so to speak, and that it's fueled by our daily activities or whatever. But part of that too is like this, this inherent purpose behind it. Like, we don't know what it was originally intended. You mentioned earlier, like, well, what is the destiny of America? So I think looking at the geography in DC and things like that, very interesting. But I also wanted to comment on the travels of the Mormons, like you were commenting earlier. They found several artifacts on their travels as they went west. So one of them was a stone in like Virginia, I think, where it had like I think the Ten Commandments or something inscribed on it, or maybe some people's names. I can't remember exactly what all was there. Well, then they found excuse me. Yeah, that was the Ten Commandments were called the Decalogue stone. They found that separate. So there was this stone case containing a stone slab, and on it had the Ten Commandments. And it had like a strap through, or a hole through the top for a strap, so that you could kind of wear it on your belt, I guess, and kind of grab it with your hand and read it. I don't know. But anyway, that was one of the artifacts they found as well. And there's, of course, rumors about the Ark, being in the Grand Canyon and stuff like that. But I do find the lore behind the Mormon stuff interesting, because we don't get a lot of that in terms, like lore wise. We got George Washington, though, who is in the fresco painting at the Capitol Dome with the apotheosis of George Washington. So we do have some type of myth making stuff going on there with him, Paul Bunyan, Daniel Boone. These sorts of figures kind of like can constitute our pantheon of gods, quote unquote. And but George Washington's depicted among all the Greek gods and goddesses, I think, in that scene. So anyway, I just wanted to mention those couple things. Thanks.
Yeah, that's what this is what speculative Gnosticism is. This is exactly what it is. But it's not looking at the ideas of the Mormons literally. It's looking at them speculatively. It's just taking, yes, that is you want to say that what is the American Gnosticism? Is it a kind of Mormonism? Sure. Yes, 100%. What was this land use or something? Sure. Are there magic stones here? Sure. Does it really matter? No. Does the use of them really matter? No. Because the reality is what I said. It's like it's the dragon under love. It's where we want to take it. It's where you want to take it, Joshua. It's not the manifest destiny is what you make of it right now. I'm not saying this to scold you. I'm just saying it. So it was like I was thinking that it's what we do with it. Because like the old guys aren't gonna do it. They're just not. They're not. They don't. They can't shift enough. They can't dance.
Well, and then to interject for a moment, I think you own property, right? So I think owning property is part of the manifest destiny thing, because you're not really guaranteed that kind of right in other countries. Whereas the American dream, anyway, is that you should be able to maybe buy and purchase property, uh, and establish a foundation, a yesod, and malkuth, your root chakra stuff, and then family. So it's like this path to self-actualization. And it's, in a sense, it is kind of like an experiment, right? When you look at it Kabbalistically. So I can kind of see what the framers were thinking in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's just like when King was talking about like Kingdom Core. It's Malkuth Core. It's exactly. I mean, that's the same thing. It's like, but what is your kingdom? In America, yes, the idea is you have a small, not small, it doesn't have to be that small, but you have like a house, you have property around it. That's your fucking Malkuth. That's your kingdom. It's you and that. And you're right, it isn't guaranteed in all countries. Some countries have leaseholds. Some countries, you know, it's you cannot really live in a house. So you live in like you own like the floor in the sky kind of thing, and it's just there is something different. I agree, but like so we have that forged consciousness for people who like have more as a quote unquote Westoid consciousness. Yeah, we have that. That's fine. We're Americanized. That's it is what it is. It's great. So we're gonna take that, know that we're a little different, know we're a little weirder, know we're a little more fucked up, but not in any extreme way. In some ways better, in some ways maybe more able to think about all these things and be like, okay, so what do we want to make of it? We have all these ideas. English is like the pretty much the global language. Like we all speak English. Like, where are we gonna go? Like, what are we gonna do with it? I think we get to choose. That's how I think of the world. Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have to go after this, so, but I'm loving this conversation, and I, I'm just going to go through I have a couple of notes of stuff that you guys had made me think of, so bear with me for a second as I hit some kind of points of stuff that has been brought up this far in the conversation before I leave. But yeah, amazing conversation, guys. Uh, the Something that you just made me think of, Jen, on this idea of like owning land and everything. I recently found out within the last few months that at one point, if you painted your door red, it was supposed to mean that you was took ownership of your house, like you had paid off all your loans and everything, and you actually owned your house, like you was the lord of the land and your house and everything. So you would paint your door red. So I found that interesting because that's kind of lost now. Like, I'm sure not everyone with a red door on their house today actually owns their house. And so talk about colors as well. You got, that kind of ties into that. Also, with the idea of serfdom as being like kind of our way out, in a way, one of the paths we can take in this new age of this possible kingdom core neo medievalism path. That is the road of ashes. That I've talked about with like Iron John, that like people like Robert Bly talks about. That is the path of ashes, because in myths like Iron John, um, it it's the rite of passage for the wild man archetype, but it always starts off with a, a high ranking figure, like a prince in this case, who for some reason either gives up or loses his nobility, and he has to go through fire and ash and grief and that portal, that path, to be reborn again in fire, and so he has to descend so he can rise again. So it's a phoenix, and a phoenix makes me think of like eagles and stuff, right? Um, so it was kind of this kind of ash kind of path is very American, I think. Um, Also, I just wanted to say, as far as myth and film, one other thing I find interesting is how a lot of westerns are like inspired by samurai films. I know I've talked about this with Jin before, like the Magnificent Seven, of course, is inspired by the Seven Samurai, and so on and so forth. There's so many different examples of it. Um, Also, uh, as far as Native American culture, you know, you I I like to talk about spider symbolism and So I feel like the Hopi Spider Woman, the Spider Goddess, the Spider Shaman kind of motif. The Weaver is in present day America as well, because we have this idea of like weaving, whether it's tails or baskets. There's always, in all these cults, we have weaving kind of motifs, and I still feel like that's still in present day America. And the last thing I'll mention is, as far as uh, new American, like Gnosticism and mysticism and all this and that. Um, this idea of meme culture, like Pepe and Kek, right? And like a reptilian kind of god, which of course is Egyptian, but also there was the interesting documentary called "You Can't Kill Meme," and it's all about how like online techno wizards help meme into reality Donald Trump as president, right? Um, and so there was this mimetic mechanics there that is kind of going around, which again, to talk about Kingdom Core, that's just like having like a high priest or wizard like Merlin in Arthurian legend, right? Um, and then my final point, I think another thing that maybe you guys could weave in as well, someone else could add this, is in the 1940s you had like the spiritualist movement, right? And of course you had a lot of grifters in that area like you do today, with like enlightening guru podcasters wanting to be like, create their own cults and stuff, essentially. So you always have those grifters, but I think it's noted that this whole idea of like the 1940s spiritualist movement is also kind of having a digital resurgence with like our kind of circles, I feel like, as well. But this is a great conversation, guys, and I can't wait for the next one.
Hey, before you go, I wanted to comment on the red door thing. We just had Passover. So think, if you were painting your door with the blood of the lamb to protect it from the angel of death, you would have a red door. You would have bought or ransomed, you see, just because that's how it's referred to a lot of times when you're in a church. Like, we were ransomed with the blood of the lamb. So it's like buying your house, and everybody in it with the blood of the lamb. Is that, dude? So spiritually, that would just blew my mind when you're talking about the red door. I've never heard that before. And the other thing it made me think of was the Rolling Stones song. So anyway, thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Great job as always. And yeah, subscribe to King of Cups if you want more of Chris, and obviously Joshua the Branch. So there you go. Okay. Well, one thing I think Chris said was very interesting, obviously, is I just think that, the ideas of America's a plus ultra nation. America's founded by magicians. Like, no question about it. What kind were they? Who the fuck cares? That's kind of my opinion. I'm like, yeah, like just treat it like the Discordians we are. That's it. Doesn't matter. I don't know. Maybe. But like take it in like the good principles. Take it in the Aeonic principles, right? Like dance into them, lean into them. Hesed, loving kindness, discernment, uses of the word, spiritual practices, like all that. That's what that's what matters. So like, let's just move forward with that. That's kind of how I think. That's more my framing. So I think that absolutely. And you know, if you listen to any of the Aeon of the Daughter, I mentioned like the idea of Hapaborea, the syncretic American religion, every single space, simply because it I would say that the Hapaborean idea actually was the foundation that led me to do the Aeon of the Daughter spaces, because it's in the syncretism of not just East and West, which are just, you know, that's kind of like dialectical horseshit. That's not really the truth. The Silk Road was everyone. The Silk Road was like Azerbaijan, where people were like, there were like Buddhists, like both kinds, like Theravadan, Mahayanis, and there were obviously underground tantrics. There were Hasidic Jews. There were Zoroastrians. There were fucking Muslims. There were Yazidis. There were it was everybody, and that is also America. So that it makes sense to have a kind of syncretic, being able to be flexible, but it's not about the syncretism as in like one to one. What God is what God. It's not about that. It's about understanding like the kind of more twilight layer behind the ideas, right? And it's like even the Mormons, they're traveling through the West. I know this will be next week's space, so spoiler alert. They're traveling from excuse me, from the East to the West. Along the way, they are notating like the architecture and the things they see as being biblical, but not just biblical, because they're also heterodox in their canon, right? So they're kind of the proto Telema. If you really want to like break it down, like yeah, it was probably Martinist. Like when Solar was on, we were talking a lot about Calvinism, a lot about Martinism. It's a big part of the story of Mormons. They were a Salem family. Like, this is exactly what we're talking about, like one to one. So they were saying there's a syncretic system. Like this is a world that also is described in the Bible. So they weren't saying it has to be fixed. It's not fixed, it's dancing. The word takes shape on the foundation on which it arises, which is also the land, right? Like Kingdom Core. Kingdom Core is obviously going to be a title of one of these spaces. Obviously, I'll credit Chris, but I'm totally taking it. At least for the space, right? Like, not for myself or not for even Threshold Saints, but at least for these spaces, I think it'll be cool. And it's a great word, so yeah, I mean but that's what it is. And it's like, do we build the walls? Yeah, probably. Do we how much do we take of it? Why not the whole thing? I think that's also like a maybe it is kind of I know somebody's gonna accuse me of being some like Nietzschean, Discordian. Like, you know what? I'm not Nietzschean. I don't even like I read that stuff in university. I honestly don't give a shit. I really don't. It's not interesting to me at all. What is interesting to me is Buddhism, is doing these spaces, and Gnosticism, and just like magic in general, and reading what people were really thinking about. Because this is like, as I always say, we're really like a few years ahead, especially like us, because we are kind of, this is a little avant garde. So we'll say a little ahead. And what the norm, not even the normies, but even maybe what people think are the cutting edge people, maybe we're a little ahead of that even. And this is also a thing that came up, is like the timeline, not just the timeline on Twitter, but the timelines in real life. Like, what is time? As I always say, time is contained in nine, time is contained in mind. It's your sod, but it's also the relationship with Binah, right? It's Kali and Bhairava. You could say that. It's a good, you know, maybe not Bhairava, maybe it's more Shiva, but it's where his corpse is. So she's standing on him, raising him into wrath, raising him into consciousness, into perception. Because as I said last time, like that's a big relationship. Is that Hesed Binah relationship? Tara is seeing him, because why? Tara has to climb through the tree. that's what makes Tara special. It's not just that Buddhists prefer her. You can even see there's a Kabbalistic reason why she's special, because that has said you're in full perception of the other things on the tree, and they also can recognize you for what you are. So she is Uma, meaning the Queen of Heaven, but she's also come back as a Dakini, meaning she's also crossed the carnal ground. So it's both things at the same time. It's neither nor. It's non-dual. And so that's what I was trying to say is like America is the Babylon. That's fine. Totally fine. What turning are we in? Well, that's interesting. We've discussed this a lot. You can say we're in the fourth turning or you can say we're in the fifth turning. It doesn't matter. Because why? Both of those things are rectified in the nine, which is time, which is the mind. That's all perception is. So there's really no point to be like super hyper fixed and like as I always say, Christian Kabbalah, really great. If you want to follow Christianity, that's great. If you want to follow Dharma, great. I think Dharma is the best because that's what I personally think. If I wanted to practice something else, I would practice something else. If I wanted to be, full-time warlock, I'd be a full-time warlock. Trust me. But no, I like Dharma, so I'm gonna stay with Dharma. And so I think the best view is the middle view because the tree is so much more clear from that view. Doesn't mean it's not really difficult. Magic is dangerous. Magic is difficult. Really difficult. It's really difficult for most people, and it's really difficult even for me. And I'm not saying I'm like advanced. It's not about advanced, but I am smart. And if it's difficult for me, it's difficult for a lot of people. I'm just more honest about it, and in some ways, and I just say, sometimes the things that arise magically and that appear as hardship, they're really just klipas. They're just waiting for us to like crack through, but that's not an externality. That is just how it can be even as simple as how do we react to things? How do we react in the moment of space time? That kind of like moment of like perception. It's kind of there's something rigpa. So that what I'm gonna bring it all the way back. Tara has the third eye, at least in Indian Tantra. I mean, yes, obviously in Buddhist Tantra, but in Indian Tantra, her third eye is what felt a therapy. Okay, that's the eye of perception. It's the third eye. It's the eye that burns. That is the flame. But it's not because she is the flame herself necessarily. Yes, burning in wisdom fire. Yes, burning in the corpse fire. Yes, but not she is not herself the flame. She's the mother of the milk ocean. She's really she's the Hesed of Hesed. She's like it's like the air and the Vajra and the waters and it's all mixed together. Because that's what green is. So she's looking at Gevra. She's looking at the fire. She's perceiving it for what it really is. That's kind of why it's her third eye. Anyways, so we'll say so it's like it's just you really have to have that loving kindness to move through the world, and loving kindness also, as we always say, requires discernment, right? Cannot have those two in they're not in dialectical opposition, they're in perfect complement. But it's hard, it's difficult. And sometimes you get mad, sometimes you get sad, sometimes you get really fucking pissed off. Sometimes you want to Mercanog on the timeline. But you channel that so I'm trying to do that. Like we're channeling it. So we're channeling it into this series, which is speculative. So what I'm trying to say, Joshua, to your greater point, is I think America is also a speculative idea. I'm not saying it in like any, just like I think most things are speculative ideas, but I think America was made to be a kind of speculative idea, a kind of speculative Gnosticism that you can, just like you don't, a compass is a compass, but it does matter where you put your starting point. So you don't have to encompass everything that came before. You can be discerning about what came before. You can be discerning about how you interpret things now. Simply because we have so much information. This is the Aeon of the Daughter, the Age of Aquarius, whatever you want to call it. I like Aeon of the Daughter. I think it's Aeon of the Daughter. So I call it that. But you know, whatever you want to call it. We have all of this. Like, this is the air, this is the ether, this is the aether wave. What we're doing right now. Yeah, it's the timeline is shit. The timeline is rough. It is rough seas out there, rough seas of knowledge and rough seas of wisdom. But that is also bullshit, because those things are also in some way derived from you, the perceiver and the actor, the creator of your timeline. So yeah, I'm being a little meta, but I think if Solar's listening back, he'll appreciate that, because I think he loves, at least he appreciates, to my face, that I talk more practical, sort of like maybe chaotician timeline magic, which is interesting, because in some ways you could say the timeline also moves reality. There's something, it affects meta reality. So I also believe that about our own consciousness, about our own will. It's not just like, oh, put it all in your little black cube. As I said, I don't think our little black cubes can actually take our full consciousness. I don't think, it doesn't make sense, right? It really doesn't make sense. The dragon breaks at, well, if you want to consider it in like a Mahavijja way, sure. You could say he breaks at 3 places. So who tames the dragon? Well, you can have Vajrabhairava or Mahabhairava. You can have Dhumavati. She only eats Ketu, though. Or you have Chinnamasta. She not kills, but clears Rahu from a birth chart. So she liberates the serpent from the cycle. But the serpent is also the hero, right? He's also the Mahavishnu. It's the same thing. So it's like what Solar was talking about. Like, there's a cycle of apotheosis, like a cycle of liberation. But like, do you come back down? Do you go up all the way? Do you come back down? Do you go up all the way? Well, that's kind of what the Anne of the Daughters, kind of the answer to as well. It like kind of answers that question, at least. Is like, yeah, it is. It's the time of rectification. It's not drowning through the. It's not death by water, or the overbearance of mercy. It can be the same thing, right? It can just be the idea. It doesn't have to be literal. Like, it doesn't have to be actual war. It can be a rhetorical war, a narrative war. That's why the goddess, at least in Tantra, she's a a courtroom goddess, but she's also a battlefield goddess, because both of those things are the same thing. A courtroom is just a kind of a battlefield. So it's all conceptual. What I'm saying is, it's all conceptual. Never take it literally. Look for the deeper meaning. Approach it non-dually. Approach it through loving kindness, and it's all great. And mostly it's bullshit, and that's okay, because sometimes in bullshit you can actually see the truth a little better if you have discernment. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Dude, I just had an epiphany. So, in Christian theology, there's the concept of the Virgin or Virgo treading upon the serpent because of the Genesis prophecy about how she'll crush the head of the serpent. So I think of that when I hear like the Rahu stuff. And I was curious if this kind of relates to like the typhonic vibration or anything like that, and how maybe this dancing figure, treads upon the serpents, because that's when we get the gift of the Holy Spirit, we're given the ability to tread upon scorpions, serpents, those sorts of things. So whatever those chthonic, lower vibrational spirits, right, we're given authority over them. So there's that quality too. And I can't help but think of the High Priestess Tarot, where she holds the law, or the Torah. That's the blue. The blue on the priest's robe represented the law, and then in a white garment. And of course, if she's a priestess, she, each month there's blood, right? So that's red, but that's also the egg. So if she's standing on the serpent, there's the egg and the serpent symbolism, which then the epiphany that hit me just now was, oh, that's very Saturnian, like the dragon pursuing the woman in Revelation and that sort of thing. So I was like, wow, it just kind of blew my mind, because snakes are kind of notorious in the animal kingdom of like going after eggs sometimes, right? Whether it's a bird or whatever. So it's like it's consuming potential, perhaps, or something like that. But I also was thinking of the reddening of the stone, the philosopher's, well, that which will become the philosopher's stone. It's albedo and then rubedo, the reddening of the white stone. Blue doesn't normally play a role in the alchemical process, but it still has like that law thing. So even if you're just following steps precisely, that alone fulfills, blue in a way. But anyway, I just wanted to mention those things because I think the whole element of like the laws a nation has and things like that kind of all contributing to the egregor and so on and so forth. So thank you.
The only egregore, Joshua, is the one you make for yourself. There, if you can decide what you want to believe. That's kind of like that's what free will is. You get to decide what you want to believe, what narratives you want to perceive, what narratives you want to pursue to understand. So absolutely, there is something about as again, the princess is different than the mother. So like the Catholics tried, and I'm not against it, but the Catholics tried to, they make her a virgin mother. Okay, so you can see this is a rectification of the two ideas. So instead of having a 4 square or a 5 square system, they had a 3. They prefer Trinity. Trinity also makes sense because a pyramid is sort of the primordial shape of the universe, right? So that's okay. But we can also acknowledge that there are other things, but it all comes back into 0. But it's really 0 and 1 because it's always like the secret +1.
What the 0 and 1 is also the serpent and the egg, then, right?
Well, it depends. It depends because yeah, the serpent can swallow the egg, but what is the egg? What is the shell? So it's a klipa. And it's like what we talked about last week. Like the seed is not, or the bija is in the emptiness. It's not in the actual seed of the pomegranate. It's not in the pith either. It's in the emptiness, the kind of contours of what those things are between in the empty space between. So it's the exact same thing. So the idea is like, okay, so say Kurukula. So she stands on the Mara of desire, of lust. So she herself does not embody or contain lust at all. It's like overcome. That doesn't mean she's not. You can't. She's not blissful. She's blissful, but she tames him through love. So he's not swallowing any seeds. He's destroying kind of the klipas that came before. That's how one way you could think of it, or the skand. Like he's clearing the road of aggregates. He's clearing the path of the debris. Like yeah, there's a seed here, there's a seed there. What kind of fruit does it bear? What is the nature of the plant it produces? Is it venomous or not venomous? Is it poisonous or toxic, or is it medicinal? Is it nutritive? Like what is it? So that's what the idea is with Rahu. He's the god of medicinal plants that are toxic. So like things like aconite or like foxglove, all of those things can be processed into medicine.
By the way, what kind of plant? Because I don't think we have a national plant in the United States. What do you think kind of represents America or North America, or like what's really prolific plant here? I wonder.
It's a really good question, and I wasn't really prepared to answer it, but it is a really good question. And It has to be obviously be something super magical, because I know if I said just like whatever came like randomly and it was lame, I would not only be embarrassed, but honestly, I know somebody would be like, "Oh, Jin's idea wasn't that good," and they would like make a thing of it. So
Well,
it's
Canada has the maple leaf, right? So I mean, that's a good proposition for that, for that matter.
I like I know this is maybe borrowing, so it's a little bit like something borrowed, something new, something whatever, and something blue. Okay, so maybe you say it's like it's irises, because there is actually orris root, so like the trade route for like the botanica or apothecaries or people doing like herbalism. That's actually a Louisiana native. That's not even from Europe.
What season is the iris? Do you know?
Actually, there are multiple seasons because it depends on the kind of iris that it is. That's kind of what's interesting about the iris. And even though it is an we'll say on the water's edge, usually, especially North American natives of irises, the root is actually pretty neutral. It's like slightly warm, but it's quite neutral, which is typical of a Jupiter herb. So that is kind of interesting as well. But there's also like a pink variety, which you could say is Venusian, because it has the root is really fragrant. So that's another thing I like about irises for like a modern American, like the symbol of America, is because they also have like very good medicine, but they also produce like a incense fragrance with the compound iridian, which is like the same the compound that is found in like blue, like bluing powder, or any of those, or turquoise or lapis lazuli. Like, yes, they all have that compound. And also does indigo plant. And interestingly, America used to be a big grower of indigo, dyer's woad, and nobody ever talks about it. And I just think it's really interesting. And there's actually some varieties of woad, or at least in the family of indigo farine producing plants, that also are North American natives. So you could like one of the wild baptisias. There's other ones too, but it is just a really interesting sort of concept that you could choose a plant based on mythology, or you could choose a plant based on like what is the most magical, what has the most like metaphysical sympathies, what is going to sort of galvanize or concretize people's view of what America is. And like you could also do that with the plant you choose, depending on its properties, right? Because it's always plus ultra. So
What do
it's
you?
polarities, right? And so the plant would be the focal point. So then what properties do you want it to contain? But the properties are also contained by the perceivers and yourself as the magician. So that's also a Trinitarian thing. So that's also cool about irises, is that the flower is often said to symbolize a Trinity, and they also are associated with the Virgin Mary. So it gives it it is a little more motherly of a plant, but the pink version, you could say, has a daughter element. So maybe you could say it's like a mother and a daughter at the same time, which is kind of how it is. So interesting. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, you just now helped me maybe make a connection too, because to get a certain pigment called midnight blue, um, it basically is like black with ultraviolet in it, and so it's real dark blue, and that is the color of the night sky on a full moon. And I probably mentioned that before, but when you mentioned about the iris giving that bluing agent, that came to mind, and I thought, oh wow, so uh, that's a very Twilight language kind of thing for me. It's the color of the stars and the sky and all that. And of course, that's where we get our laws. In this case, in this tradition, is from the heavens, right? So that's how the blue gets its association with the heaven. Whether it be daytime sky blue or nighttime sky blue. But of course, they're a lunar religion too. So, and again, Passover occurs with a full moon. So that's that blood of the red blood, the white moon, and the blue sky. The night of Passover, which is when Christ was crucified, all those elements are present there. So, what I was trying to kind of get at earlier is, I guess, in a sense, it's almost an attempt to recreate that type of energy, right? But that energy is what maybe gives like the salvation element is like breaking free from spiritual captivity. So it's that red, white, and blue combination, whether it be the priestess or Mother Mary, who was also present at the foot of the cross, right, on that night. So, a lot of those things you were saying really were coming to mind.
Well, it's really interesting because I think you could consider, like, you're totally right. And so that's also what makes sense for an iris, kind of like using your argument, is that what is produced in synthesis? Well, it's purple, obviously. Hi, Shakti. How are you? Miss you. Appreciate you. We see you. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And yeah, that's purple's produced in synthesis. What color is an iris? Usually purple, but obviously that, and as I said, that gives it more of a maternal element. But then there's also the, like, orris root, but they're irises, right? They're just pink. They're more woodland than they are of the shoreline, or not the shoreline, but like the wetland, right? So what is that? So you also have, like you're saying, from the law, right? But the day sky is also the night sky. So yeah, it's the father and the mother kind of in synthesis, you could say. Who is the son? Well, the son clearly is the word. Well, what is the word? The word is what you make of it. The word is what you practice of it. The word is what you do with it. And like we speak the words into space, and what is that? That is, like, it's a dancing girl, like that. So it's like when we speak the words of truth, obviously, if you speak like bullshit all the time, then it's not, then it's gonna look like something else. But in general, yeah, that's the idea, at least, right? But just treat it speculatively as well. But I agree with you. So purple's a good color simply because it also refers to the color of the actual flag. And like, there's obviously a Hasidic element in having the 13 stars on on one of the flags from 1777. It's also a magic year, right? So, but it also makes sense because then you have like the 13 original colonies, and then, right, like 13 properties of Hesed. Like, yeah, it's one to one. Like, they're talking about, like, we're going to create like a world of mercy or kingdom of mercy, or like a federated. They're saying that's their intention, at least. Now, do we understand it as that? As we have discussed many times in these spaces, there's a lot of complications with how people understand Hesed, and it's a lot more complicated than what people think, but it's also not. It can just be about, like, generally having, like, loving kindness as like a primary sort of focal point, but it also happens in discernment. I know I've said this like 3 times tonight, but I just think, like, if we're going to talk about it, let's, like, talk about it what it is. It's both things. So it's like what Solary was even saying. There's sort of like an indifference. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay if people have indifference to you at times, because it's, even for me, like, yeah, I love doing these spaces. I love going on other people's shows, and I love doing all that. But really, at the end of the day, like, I have to live with myself. And it's not like me. It's just, podcasting is just my hobby. It was never meant to, like, be anything more than me just, like, talking shit and exploring weird and interesting ideas that were percolating for so many years. That's all it was ever supposed to be. So what I'm trying to say is, it's all about what you make of it day to day. it's all about like what you do with it moment to moment, especially for you, Joshua, because I think sometimes you really focus on like the religious framework that I'm talking about, but I really mean it very speculatively. Like I'm just talking very speculatively, and I'm talking about process of consciousness. Nothing is like nothing externalities. Like I'm a anti supernaturalist, really anti spiritualist, maybe you could even say. I believe in it. I think it's real. But what is reality? I just think that's more in flux than I'm not fixed in it. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Well, that raises an interesting point because remember earlier when Chris was on, he was talking about his spiritual experience when he saw the Native American in the forest and how it had left a lifelong impression upon him, which caused him to be a spiritual seeker. Whereas the other boy that was with him had his father explain it away, right? And so it deadened him to the spirit. It didn't exist or whatever. It was explained away. And so it made me wonder like about rites of passage in general. So, what types of those things do you think are important for people to have? Because if you haven't had a genuine spiritual experience, it requires a lot of faith maybe to believe in things like the spirit realm, for instance, something you can't perceive with your senses. So, what do you have in comment about that, perhaps?
So, in terms of what people should do, like again, I have no opinion on what people should do. I have maybe a suggestion is that you can look at what actually works in culture or cultures historically, perhaps, or you can figure something out new. I don't know, just like that's what comes to mind for me is like I agree that people need like more fixed, perhaps more traditional, and no one should be scared of those words because it doesn't. They're just words, just vessels, right? So yeah, I think that people can look to those and say, okay, what worked? That's how I think of it, Joshua. I don't really think of it as, again, I don't think it was super fixed. I think it's like you can decide what you want to, like, what the reality you want to create.
Well, do you
So,
think like a birth chart could maybe, like for instance, if somebody's an earth sign or has like heavy earth sign chart, would that make it harder for them to maybe have, uh, like a extrasensory experience or something? I was just curious if there was any take on that from like the Eastern perspective. Like, do people worship these deities or acknowledge them as just like a fictional thing, or do they actually, do some people genuinely believe in their presence and commune with them, so on and so forth?
I mean, I believe in them. I believe in them personally. Like, I believe in them. I'm just saying that it's a dialectical relationship. It's a co-creative relationship. It's not just me, but it's I'm a cause of it. So, however you want to interpret that, I always say like non-dual reality is probably the best approach. It's both real and not real at the same time. It's neither nor. So it's like the example you brought up. Like the father told the one kid no, and Chris was reaffirmed in his sort of like what he perceived. But I also think it also comes from the perceiver. Like I think that's what I was trying to say about the mounds. I think like those like I said okay, so we'll use tantra. So I think like Bhairava is that. I think he's like Mahakala on the time on like the river of time, the river of quicksilver, and he takes form and he looks crazy in static electricity, and he's black as night, and he's like blue as day. He's both all of those things at the same time. And he's ferocious, and it's kind of like he's kind of like it's like a crazy screaming sound, but it's just like it's the exact same sound as like electricity. It's just like we usually don't really tend to hear that. So that's really what that's I think it's a process of consciousness, and I think that the aeon is psychic rather than supernatural, or rather than magical. Even though I think magic is psychic, and I think it's all I think all of those things are just degrees of the same thing, but I just think that some of those ideas are more prominent now. So that's what I tend to emphasize, although you can obviously think of it how you want. And welcome, Beth. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. We see you, we hear you, and we um, uh, thank you so much for spending your time in space with us. Yes, go ahead, Joshua.
Well, something else I've kind of noticed about American culture rather, is when compared to like Europe, for instance, our churches don't really have the same type of awe-inspiring presence, and I think that here in America, because of the way things are just done, we suffer from the death of detail, and that's where you find beauty. Like uh, a typical building in the church is in today isn't even. I mean, it could be gone next month and be something totally different, right? So there's nothing that really sets it apart culturally. Because in a cathedral, for instance, not that I'm advocating for Catholicism or anything. I'm just trying to state a point that there was cymatics, vibration, that those sorts of things going on inside the temple structure and such, and even in the Hebrew temple, and those measurements were exact for reasons because they revealed beauty. There was beauty in certain patterns and proportions and so on and so forth. And so one of the things I've noticed about American spirituality or culture is that we just don't really have that well preserved. And I've often wondered, I mean, have we ever really pondered the consequences of that, long term? Um, so I don't know. I was just because I noticed some of these other countries have like age old temples, but everything here is so new and it's not really built to last, So it's like part of the respect to deity it should be to make a lasting structure, right? Which brings up an interesting point. If Trump tries to build the temple, right? I didn't plan to get into that, but I wanted to make one comment. However, you mentioned Iris, and so the legend of the rainbow from the Greek tradition is related to Iris, and so the rainbow has taken on an interesting meaning too in American culture. So it's also associated with the flood. But anyway, didn't want to talk too much. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you so much, Joshua. So I'll just say about the rainbow. Yeah, they can tell you what it means, but you can also know what it actually means. So, whatever. I mean, I'm on the right. I'm more conservative than that. I just am, and I've talked about it a million times. So I just think that you can just take of it what you want, and like clearly, when the people drew the swastika through it, there's a Buddhist idea there. It's the non-dual wheel of time, right? It's like all the colors moving into one, moving into primordial view. That's the idea. Single pointedness, right? So that's all it means to me. So I don't really care about any of that other stuff. And I also think like, yeah, that is the daughter as well. Not the rainbow shit, the idea of like what a rainbow is. It's like the colors of light, really. Like what is the water vapor? You could say is the Netzach or is the Hesed? Maybe it's both. Because sometimes rainbows are also formed by ice crystals, so you could definitely say it's both in those instances. It's the light passing through. It's like the Hode, because it's the colors, the naming of things, the naming of the individual waves of light. That's what Hode is. It's just like the name of the color. But it's also spectral, right? That's why the rainbow is not really pink. Sort of appears around it because it gives contour to the things that arise in it and around it, or in it and around it. Yes. uh, so yeah, so that's what I want to say about that. And it's also a bow. It's very like Kurokula like, right? She holds the bow of, well, you could say there's a million flowers. It can be said, but you could say like Utpala flowers. You could say like um, lotuses. I mean, hibiscus. You could say mallow. You could say like a million things. But yeah, basically that's what it is. It's like it's like the seeds. They're spectral. The words are there, they have meaning if you know how to understand them. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
You reminded me the rainbow can only become visible at 42 degrees when the light hits at an angle of 42 degrees, and then it refracts like a prism through the water molecules and creates the rainbow effect. Well, 42 is an interesting number because that's the number of generations from Noah to Christ, I think. And there was never a rainbow at all until after the flood, according to the Judaic tradition. So it was like a covenant sign, so that after the flood, it was a promise never to destroy the earth again with water. And I kind of have a theory that maybe some of the water, I think the moon used to be covered in water and it came onto the earth during the flood. But anyway, that's just a theory because the second destruction's fire. So I think the fire will come from the sun probably. But anyway, so the covenant was with humans after the flood not to do it again with water. And so the rainbow represents a covenant and a promise about that. But then in Revelation, there's a rider on a white horse who has a rainbow, so to speak. He has a cloth in his hand, and I think it's probably a piece of the Joseph's multicolored robe, like a rainbow robe, and he uses that, I think, in a hand fasting ceremony because there's a wedding in Revelation too, and he weds the body of Christ to the Messiah. So it's interesting because only a judge can do that, right? And so he might be from like the tribe of Dan, which is serpent and all that, because we were talking about the serpent stuff. So anyway, I know I kind of got onto the weeds there, but the rainbow though is also like a rainbow bridge, known as the Bifrost in the Norse traditions, and that was a bridge or gateway between Asgard, which is where the gods lived, so to speak, and then Midgard, which is where what we call Earth, basically. So it's interesting to have that visualization of imagining when you see a rainbow that it's it would be like a bridge to another land or something. It'd take a lot of faith to walk on it, right? But anyway, I think that that was just what I wanted to mention about the generations to Christ. And so 42 has some interesting symbolism because we're told that to wait to study certain things, to like that age and all. So I think there's some hidden stuff there concerning 42 especially.
Well, 6 is the number of the state, right? It's Tippereth. They always use 6. You always will see 6 in state rituals. This is like a tale as old as time. At least a tale as old as like the Iranian text on the Vedas. So yeah, it's Tippereth. They always try and draw things into synthesis. Now, they able to? I don't know. Not really, not in my opinion. It feels very decoherent. So I think we've all noticed that. I mean, that's it. That's what happened in 2020. Things went into decoherence. Then, like for me, that's what happened for me. So I just take it conceptually, Joshua. Like when you're talking about like the world destroyed by fire, what is the world? The world is the girl. What is the aeon of the daughter? She's dancing in heatless fire. What is path is she on? She's on path 22. She can take the fire. What is the fire? It's lust and desire. So she stands on that demon. She stands on that Mara. She conquered because we can conquer it in us. That doesn't mean that our nature's evil. We're not going to be Calvinistic about it. And we're not going to be like super crazy utopian about it. But loving kindness is the key. Because where is she standing? She's standing at the 5, looking at the 4. And in Christian Kabbalah, what is the 4? The 4 is Christ. It's Jesus. Yes, he does arise at Tiferet. But maybe it's their union. But what does that mean? That's just a conceptual idea. Don't get stuck on. I'm not saying for you, Joshua, but just nobody gets stuck on that. It's just a speculative idea. Okay, speculative Kabbalah, we could even say, although it's true as well. They're coming together at Tiferet. So it's the synthesis of our perception that we are aware in this, even in this space right now, just the people that I know or see, excuse me. We just because we know that the esoterica exists and we know that the traditional religion exists. That is the Aeon of the Daughter. That's what it is. Are we in perception? Are we in full knowing? Are we in wisdom? Do we have discernment? Do we exercise loving kindness? You have to bring all things into synthesis, but the core is really, it's the object and the perceiver. And once the distinction is over, that's non-dualism. So if you can get there, you don't have to get there all the time. You can't live there, really. But just have that kind of consciousness where you can flexibly be like, oh, okay, I get what Jin's talking about. Just treat it like really flexibly. Don't treat it rigidly. Dance, zucchini, right? And what is she dancing? She appears on the carnal ground because we also live on the carnal ground. Because our minds are also in the carnal ground. Because we have a degraded low consciousness. That doesn't make us bad. It's not bad. It's just it's the nature of the worlds, right? It's where we live on the worlds. But we can bring Hod and Netzach in. We can raise those things up into consciousness. We can raise those things up into synthesis. We can even reach the golden child or whatever you want to call it. Like Christ consciousness, yeah, that's fine. Or Buddha nature, that's higher than Tiferet. But basically, that's the idea. If you want to go to death, go to death. If you want to go together, go together. If you want to inject yourself, have fun. Go skydance. That's what I say. So I think this is what I'm trying to say is Aeon of the Daughter is about unification. But it's unification in who? It's unification in you. It's you knowing that all the Gnostic stuff that came before, it's super interesting. But like what we talked about this is so much in Aeon of the Daughter, like how much of history is not really a lie, but it's not really the truth either. Because it's sort of both. Because it's like when we live read the Gnostic text, it's like who is telling you what the text means? Do we even have a means to judge, to weigh, to discern what this even is? And yes, it's saying something super profound, but do we even understand the depths, the layers, the densities of its profundity? Can we see the diamond thunder underneath the truth beneath the husk? I'm not, still not totally convinced that we have the full scope of understanding of what those texts are and what they mean, even for me. But I always try and approach them very speculatively and say, yes, I'm not like a scholar of Gnosticism, but as someone who sees a axial system, so not perennial, but an axial system, the tree underlying all these things, I think that I can read it. I just try and keep in mind non-dualism. It doesn't mean I live there all the time. It just is flexible. So I try and look at it knowing it's a translation. And so I want to close out at 11:07 because obviously that, or 10:07, excuse me, because that will be a magic number. And I will let you obviously plug yourself, Joshua. But I want to say that you have to treat Aeon of the Daughter as like something that it's like it's she's dancing in your mind because that's where the carnal ground is. And you have to remember that like love is in the emptiness. It's in that sort of interstitial space. Doesn't really exist tangibly. It's kind of just it's just like what love really is. That's like anyone who's been in love will know. It's not even in the physiological feeling. It's in like it's in the polarities. It's in the fucking plus ultra. So, anyways, Joshua, please plug yourself, and we'll close out.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me as William Birkin here on Twitter. So just shoot me a message if you want to chat about anything. And one last thought there. I was going to ask you if you would say like green Tara I heard you mention that. I was going to say, is that kind of like Statue of Liberty in a sense?
No, because the Buddhist deities are they're free of preconception. So they're kind of outside of what we can place on them. As I said, Tara has moved up and down the tree simply in that one name. She's fallen down, she's risen up. That's the idea of Tara. So she can't really be contained in those ideas of like justice and liberty and all of those things, but you can say that maybe those are her daughters. You could kind of say, yeah, you could express it like that. But you could say, what is her? Who is she? Well, she is the star who self combusts. So sometimes you have to know when to pray and know when to let go. That's kind of the lesson with that. Like, you don't grasp. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need rectification. And how does she rectify? Through loving kindness. That's who Tara is. Tara is she's as Diamond Thunder as the boys. She's like, that's why she's special. Right? She self-combusts. She knows when to stay and when to flay. You can say it like that. That's a joke. That's a joke. Just okay. So I'm just saying that as a joke. She doesn't even hold a kartika. So at least in the Buddhist iconography. Okay. So saying that, I do want to end right now. Thank you guys. Thank you, Allison, special co-host. I'm sorry you didn't. I don't know if you want to speak, and if you didn't, that's okay. But I hope that the boys Kabbalah night did not dissuade you from speaking. And of course, you are always welcome as honorary co-host to come anytime you want. And if you do want to speak, please do. Avi, Thaddeus Maximus, Cassandra, Beth, Shakti, Ram, Bob Davis. or perhaps at least I'll say I was thinking of our astrologer friend John the whole night, but I'm glad that his friend Bob could make it. We have Blue Hour Bookery and Vivian. I think Vivian might be a bot, but that's okay. What should I say? Okay, well, we'll end at 11:11 or 10:10. Excuse me, 10:10. We'll end at 10:10. And so I'll say, I guess I'll end it. Which is fine with me, obviously. I've been enjoying my newfound Tiferatic whatever consciousness, I guess. That's a joke as well. Okay, nobody clipped that, Matt, and captured me saying something dumb. Okay, so New American Gnosticism. Oh, my show. Maybe we'll talk about Threshold Saints for a second. So, yeah, I have tons of episodes coming up. So, Joshua's will be one. So, Chris's will be one, and Solar's will be one. And I'm recording so much. Like, I honestly don't want to be recording. People keep asking to come on, and I feel like I'm shaking with nerves, like just like being like, oh my god, I've got so much work to do, so much outside work, so much like job work, so much everything. So that's why I'm not keeping up the greatest, because it's not bad. It's not bad. Yes, Allison, please go ahead.
Oh my gosh, I just wanted to say, hey, you guys are so great, by the way, of like thinking of your words like on the spot. Cause like I'm no way a podcaster. I'm more of like a writer, more like a reader and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wanted to say it was super fun listening to you guys, and you guys are very, very knowledgeable, and it's so interesting to hear. And I see my homegirl Cassandra in the chat. We're mutuals on Instagram and Twitter. She's super cool. But yeah, no, I just wanted to say I love listening to it, and I can't wait to come back for more. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Really appreciate that. And obviously, we appreciate you all. Love you all. Have a great night. Go forth in synthesis. Be the magicians of your own timeline and your own lives, because the great work is what? It is your life. And you are at least the co-ruler of that destiny, to borrow some new age language. But love is the cause of knowledge. So go forth with that very profound, maybe primordial wisdom in your minds and your hearts. Okay, good night.